The world begins in darkness, not the cozy kind that wraps around your bed at night. No, this is the old kind, the first kind, thick, absolute unblinking. A darkness that stretches like the ocean and hangs heavier than fog. There's no sun, no moon, no stars to wink encouragement from the sky. Just blackness pressed against the earth like a blanket that forgot how to lift. You walk slowly, your feet press into damp, mossy earth. The trees are there, you can feel them, but you can't see their outlines. The cedar trunks creak like old ships and breathe mist into your face. Somewhere a raven calls, not the raven, just a raven. Even he sounds unsure, like he's testing the air with his voice. The people in this place live by touch and memory. They carve without seeing. They fish by feel, listening for the splash of salmon. They speak in whispers because shouting in the dark feels like tempting something ancient. Something listening. In the villages, really, just hollowed-out clearings with low shelters, they tell stories. Not yet myths, just possibilities. Someone says there must be light somewhere. Another says perhaps it was stolen, and someone else, an elder, maybe leans closer to the fireless hearth and hums. It was never ours to begin with. The darkness isn't silent. Wind sighs through the trees, branches rub against each other like old hands, rivers murmur lost and silvery in the void. And always that low rustle of wings like feathered laughter riding the air. Some say time doesn't pass here, it wanders. Yet even in this pitch you notice patterns. Certain birds call at what feels like the same moment each day. Tides swell and shrink, guided by something unseen. And deep beneath it all, the people begin to dream of shapes of a circle in the sky, bright and warm and terrifying. Historians still argue whether the Haida oral tradition, particularly this myth, reflects a period of literal darkness caused by volcanic ash from the Pacific Ring of Fire. Some point to global eruptions around 536 CE that dimmed skies across the northern hemisphere. Others dismiss the link, preferring the story as pure metaphor. Either way, the darkness is real to you. You sit near a silent stream and scoop water with cupped hands. It's cold sharp, like it's hiding something. A fish slips past your ankle. You blink, though blinking means nothing in a place without light. Then there's a sound, different from the others. A low, rumbling chuckle tucked into the canopy. Raven is watching. Not that you can see him. But he's always watching, bored and clever and perpetually hungry. A shapeshifter, a meddler, a cosmic prankster with feathers darker than ink and eyes bright as betrayal. And even now he's hatching a plan, because Raven has grown tired of this lightless world. Tired of stumbling and guessing and eating bland roots. He wants more, not just light, drama. And here's your first strange tidbit. Some Haida tales suggest the world was deliberately kept dark by a powerful being, a hoarder of light. Not a villain exactly, just overly cautious, like someone who keeps the good plates locked up forever, waiting for a guest who never comes. You follow the path Raven once walked, or rather slunk on his first great heist. He moves not just through space, but through form. He's a man one moment, a bird the next. There may be mist curling over a fallen log. He has rules, but he breaks them. He has a belly, but it's never full. Tonight you rest your head on a mossy log and listen to the world breathe. Somewhere far upriver, Raven hears a story of an old man who hides something round and glowing in a box. Raven perks up. His feathers ripple, his stomach growls, Because in a land of eternal darkness, what could be more delicious than light? Mainstream historians often debate how the concept of a raven, the common corvid, became the trickster deity in so many Pacific Northwest stories. Was it because ravens are smart? Sure, but also they're shameless. They steal, they play, they watch humans like they're the ones writing myths about us. You smile in the dark because you know something's about to shift. Raven is done waiting. He's stretching his wings now, plotting nonsense that might just save the world, or at least entertain him for a while. His claws twitch, his eyes gleam, and somewhere deep in the forest the first sparks of mischief crackle like twigs underfoot. In the pitch-black hush you think you hear a whisper, "Let there be theft." You trudge along the riverside trail where roots clutch at your ankles and the moss squishes beneath your steps like soggy bread. There's still no light, just that damp, velvety black that tastes of pine sap and cold stone. Somewhere above a branch groans, and then a low cough, almost like laughter muffled in feathers. It's Raven. Not just any raven. The raven. He's perched just beyond where your eyes can reach, but you feel him, that ancient, restless presence like a joke waiting to happen. He's hungry, but not just in the belly. No raven's hunger is existential. He wants chaos, beauty, awe. Something to break the dreary pattern of fishbones and fog. You sit on a boulder, and Raven sidles closer, not flying, just walking with that hop-waddle arrogance only birds and toddlers truly master. He tilts his head at you. One eye gleams. You feel slightly judged. Still wandering in the dark, he squawks, pretending not to be smug. Raven's feathers are oil-slick black, the kind that almost seems to shimmer with colors you can't quite name. They say he was once white, you know, bone white, but that's a tale for later. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Raven doesn't. Right now, he's focused on something he overheard in the village up the coast. A rumor passed between grandmothers during a cedar root basket weaving session. One leaned in and said, "My cousin's husband's uncle's spirit helper told me there's light, real light, in a box." And Raven took off mid-sentence, barely waiting to finish stealing a half-eaten clam. You follow the trail of his thoughts, which are scattered and shimmering like beach glass. He's heard of the old man who lives upriver, a recluse, strange, paranoid, keeps his longhouse sealed up tighter than a clam with stage fright. But more importantly, he's said to guard something no one else has seen. A box, not a little wooden keepsake, not some souvenir. This box is legendary, carved from ancient cedar, bound with sinew, sealed with pitch and secrecy. And inside, rumor says, is light itself. The original, untouched, unshattered light. A glowing orb so bright the old man never lets it out. He just opens it a crack sometimes alone to remind himself what power looks like. Raven's stomach growls. It echoes like a prophecy. He's tired of groping around in darkness, of stealing leftovers from blind fishermen, of hearing the forest sigh without ever seeing it stretch. What's the point of feathers if you can't preen in the sun? And here's your quirky tidbit in some versions of the Haida tale. Raven doesn't just want the light, he wants to be admired for bringing it. Classic trickster move. Not content to fix the problem, he wants a parade, or at least some flattering gossip. So Raven begins to plan, which is unusual, honestly. Planning isn't Raven's thing. He usually just laughs, and leaves you to clean up the mess. But this is different. The prize is too good, too shiny. So he starts watching. He perches near the old man's home, hidden in the treetops, just a feathered outline against the black canopy. The old man, wrinkled like driftwood eyes, like glacier ice, shuffles in and out of the longhouse. He mutters to himself, carries firewood, eats dried fish, but never ever lets the box out of his sight, except when his granddaughter is nearby. Ah, the granddaughter, she's the soft spot. Raven sees it instantly. The girl brings him water, braids his hair, sings to him in the dim hush. She's kind, clever, and bored out of her mind, just like Raven. He watches her laugh at invisible jokes and thinks, maybe? Now historians still argue whether the Raven myth was ever meant to moralize. Was Raven a villain, a savior, or just a mirror held up to human impulse? One school says he symbolizes creative destruction. Another insists he's a reminder that even chaos can bring beauty. A third group claims the myth was never meant to be interpreted at all, and you should stop asking so many questions and just listen to the wind. But Raven, he doesn't care. He just wants in. So one morning, if you can call it that, in eternal night, he lands beside the riverbank where the girl bathes. He watches the water swirl around her feet. Then he picks up a pine needle in his beak and drops it into the current. Casual, innocent. She scoops up a handful of water and drinks. You hold your breath because you already know what he's done. Raven has turned himself into that pine needle. And now, nestled inside her, he waits. Because what's a trickster without a little theatrical flair? He could have broken in, smashed the box, caused a fuss. But no, Raven prefers irony, mischief with meaning. He wants to be born into the house of light, to steal it from the inside. Somewhere inside her, he grins. You lie back in the damp moss, imagining the scene, a girl suddenly feeling a flutter in her belly. An old man wondering why the shadows seem to ripple more than usual. And Raven, tiny and scheming, preparing his grand entrance. There's no turning back now. The light is closer than it's ever been, and so is the theft of the century. You wake to the sound of river water whispering against smooth stones, and somewhere not far off the thud-thud of someone chopping firewood. The darkness hasn't changed, it's still thick as smoke and heavy with dreams, but something in the air feels expectant, like a held breath. Or maybe it's just Raven. Inside the longhouse, the granddaughter stirs. She stretches slowly, feeling an unfamiliar weight in her belly. Not pain, not discomfort, more like mischief with elbows. She hums an old lullaby, unaware that the pine needle she swallowed days ago was no accident, that she now carries something ancient, something feathered and laughing and very opinionated. Raven, curled deep inside her like a secret, taps his metaphorical fingers together. He's growing. Not in the way of human children, though the body he's building will look human enough for now. But in spirit, in plot, in punchline, Raven is already pacing the floor, waiting for his moment. Meanwhile, the old man continues his ritual. Each morning, though he doesn't call it that since mornings haven't existed for who knows how long, he walks to the far end of the longhouse, pulls back a heavy hide curtain, and kneels before a cedar box. The box is lashed with sinew cords and adorned with carved spirals, each one etched with symbols older than speech. You watch from the shadows, heart thudding as he places one palm reverently on the lid. He doesn't open it, just listens. Inside, something hums. This is the box that holds the sun. Now you might be wondering, how exactly does one store a sun? And the truth is, even the Haida weren't too literal about it. The sun is often described in these stories not as a burning ball of gas, but as a luminous object, an orb, a crystal, a bundle of light like hot breath wrapped in cedar bark. But here's the historical nugget the Haida people believed in containers of power. Boxes and masks were more than decoration. They were sacred vessels able to hold stories, spirits, and yes, light itself. The old man is its guardian. Not its creator, not its owner, just someone who believes that letting the sun out would ruin everything. Maybe he saw the world before the dark and decided it was better this way. Maybe he just liked having the only secret worth whispering about. Either way, he guards it fiercely. But now he's distracted because his granddaughter has started glowing. It's faint at first, just a soft shimmer beneath her skin like fireflies trapped in glass. She walks past his sleeping mat and leaves a trace of warmth. She sings and the air hums in harmony. And then one night, she gives birth. Not with pain, not with ceremony. It's more like a sneeze than a miracle. One moment she's napping, and the next there's a squawking, flapping, damp baby on the floor. Small, loud, radiant. The old man blinks. This child isn't entirely human. His hair is thick and black, but gleams like feathers in starlight. His hands curl like talons when he cries. And cry he does, constantly, loudly, dramatically. Raven now in baby form is in his element. He wails if he's not held. He shrieks if he's not fed the exact root mash he likes. He throws fish guts across the longhouse with suspicious aim. The old man, exhausted, begins muttering about that strange gleam in his eyes and the way he stares at the box. Because, of course, baby Raven is obsessed. Every day he wiggles closer to it, pretends to crawl accidentally in its direction, uses his new chubby cheeks and irresistible giggle to win trust. And all the while he's scheming, planning, watching how the old man unties the sinew, memorizing how the lid squeaks. Now here's your quirky tidbit in some fringe versions of the story. The box doesn't just hold the sun, it holds three lights. The sun, the moon, and the stars nested inside each other like the most dangerous Matryoshka doll in myth. A box within a box within a box. Some say the old man even stored voice inside one of them, and people couldn't speak until Raven let it out. Meanwhile, back in the longhouse, things get noisier. Raven begins timing his tantrums. When the old man naps, he screams. When he eats, Raven howls. When he dares to even glance toward a moment of peace, there's a sudden shriek like a sore meeting bone, but no gore. We promised PG-13. And eventually the old man folds. He's old, not foolish. He knows the baby is strange, but he also loves him. Grandchildren are like that, equal parts headache and heartache. So one day, during an especially operatic Raven sob session, the old man sighs. He walks over to the box, muttering, "Just a little, just enough to calm him." He loosens one sinew cord. Raven immediately stops crying. He watches eyes wide and calculating as the lid lifts. And inside, a glow spills out. Gentle, warm, not blinding, not yet. Just the suggestion of radiance. The way your eyes adjust to candlelight after years of shadow. You hold your breath as Raven's baby eyes reflect it. In that moment, he doesn't cry, doesn't gurgle, doesn't blink. He just absorbs. The old man shuts the box quickly, mumbling something about not spoiling the child. But it's too late. Raven has seen it. He knows how it opens. And now all he has to do is wait. Historians debate whether the origin of this tale points to psychological truths, how cultures seek to explain the emergence of consciousness light, or even knowledge itself. But you don't need a degree to know something big is coming. The boy is quiet now, too quiet, and his feathers are starting to glint. The old man thinks the worst is behind him. The child raven in disguise has finally stopped screaming. He plays with cedar shavings, giggles when you shake a shell rattle, crawls in circles, occasionally pausing to coo at his reflection in a puddle. Just a normal baby, just oddly luminous. The old man relaxes. Fully, he's still a creature of caution, but enough to fall asleep with the box untied sometimes, enough to leave the room for more than a minute, enough to trust, which, in a trickster tale, is like holding out a pie to a cartoon raccoon. You lie by the fire pit watching Raven as child do his thing. He toddles innocently near the box face aglow as if he's just discovering it exists. The act is flawless. You almost believe him. Almost. Then one evening the old man steps out, just to check the fishnet he's strung across the river. He's gone no more than 3 slow heartbeats before Raven stands up fully upright, child no longer. His back cracks, his fingers stretch, his eyes narrow, and he's laughing. Not the full-throated cackle, yet just a low, knowing chuckle that says, finally. The box is there, untied. Raven pads across the floor. He lifts the lid. Light floods the room. Not a beam, not a trickle floods. It spills out like water from a broken dam, filling every corner with warmth and colour. You reel backward, shielding your eyes with your sleeve. For the first time you see the grain of the cedar walls, the weave of the reed mats, the gleam of fish scales drying near the fire. Raven grins. Inside the box lies an orb, a glowing golden sphere pulsing like a heartbeat. Raven lifts it with reverence, and the moment it touches his feathers, it begins to shrink. Not dim, not fade, shrink, as though recognizing him, as though merging. And here's your quirky tidbit. One lesser-known version of the myth says Raven's feathers turned black because he absorbed the light, searing his white plumage until it charred. Another says he rolled the orb in soot to hide it better. A third, frankly less dignified version claims he just dropped it in a cooking pit and had to improvise. Whatever the cause, his feathers shimmer as the light disappears into them. The room dims slightly, but not back to black. Not anymore. Raven glows now, from within. The old man returns, drops his fish. He stands, frozen mouth open as Raven turns, no longer a child, no longer pretending. Raven is his full feathered, sharp-beaked self again, wings, outstretched tail feathers fanned in defiance. He's majestic and smirking. Thanks for keeping it warm, he says probably. Maybe in words. Maybe just with a wink and a squawk. Tricksters speak many languages and most of them are sarcasm. Then he bolts right through the smoke hole in the roof, feathers brushing the cedar edges. The orb pulses within him bright enough to make his whole body gleam like a coal. He soars into the sky, trailing light in streaks behind him. The first dawn is coming. Historians still argue whether the story symbolizes the seasonal shift, how the Haida and other First Nations observe the return of light in winter. Some say Raven is simply the bringer of spring. Others think the story encodes a rare solar eclipse passed down through metaphor. One bold theory links it to ancient migrations where new lands were reached as sunlight returned after weeks of coastal darkness. But all of that feels far away now as you watch Raven rise. He flaps higher and higher, each beat of his wings throwing sparks into the sky. Below, the longhouse blazes with residual glow. The old man stumbles outside, shaking a fist, shouting curses that vanish into the wind. Raven doesn't look back. Of course not. He's busy cackling. You follow his flight with wide eyes. He darts between mountain peaks, dives low over the sea, startles herons into flight and orcas into breaches. And all the while, the light within him begins to leak, not in failure, but in intention. He lets it drip, not much, just enough. A golden mist touches the treetops. Dew catches it and flares like tiny fires. The rivers glisten for the first time. Fish blink, confused. Bears blink, hungry. People stumble from their longhouses, shielding their eyes with palms, falling to their knees in awe, or tripping on firewood, which is also valid. The light is back. And for now it's free. But here's a wrinkle: Raven doesn't release all of it. That's the twist no one wants to say out loud. He keeps some. Tucks it under his wing, or maybe deep in his beak, or perhaps in that secret pouch tricksters always seem to have. Because power, especially stolen power, is never fully shared. You lie on a hillside, blinking into the sudden warmth. And above you, Raven circles once, a silhouette of smugness against the dawn. He calls once, a long, throaty croak that sounds suspiciously like a punchline. Then he vanishes, just like that, gone. But the sky isn't dark anymore, and nothing ever will be again. Light spills across the land like a secret finally confessed. You sit beneath a cedar tree, blinking in wonder as the world takes shape around you. The sea is not just a sound anymore, it sparkles blue and alive. The trees are no longer looming guesses, but towers of green brushed with gold. The mountains that loomed like silent rumors in the dark now stretch with icy clarity into a sky that has never worn color before. Everything has changed. And it's all because Raven, that thieving, shape-shifting troublemaker, tucked the sun into his feathers and flew off, laughing. You stretch out on the moss, warmed by the first morning light. The sun isn't hovering over you like a spotlight. It's climbing slowly, almost shyly, painting the world as it rises. It touches cliffs and wakes eagles. It skims the rivers and coaxes mist upward in lazy ribbons. Even the rocks look surprised, as if they forgot they had color. But then the people begin to notice something else. Shadows. They'd never seen them before. In the long reign of darkness, there was nothing to cast or receive a shadow. But now, with light, comes its opposite. The people stare, whisper, reach out their hands, and watch black shapes mimic them on the ground. Some are amused, others are unsettled. A few children try to chase their shadows, screeching and giggling, convinced these black things are tiny animals trying to escape. One woman yells at hers, certain it's a spirit attached to her foot. She steps in a puddle and blames it on her dark twin. The village erupts into argument, laughter, and mild panic. And here's your quirky tidbit: in some Pacific Northwest folklore, shadows weren't just side effects, they were considered spirit traces, footprints of the soul. Losing one, or having it stolen, was seen as dangerous. Some believed a skilled shaman could weigh a shadow to see if someone had been cursed or healed. Raven, of course, watches all of this from a tree branch. He perches high above the chaos, preening smugly. His feathers still gleam faintly. The light he's released is doing its work, transforming the world, unsettling it, making it interesting. That's his favorite kind of success. Below him, the people begin to adapt. They shade their eyes with woven hats. They learn to rise early and nap during the height of day. They build shelters with doorways facing east to welcome the sun. The children begin drawing pictures in the dirt trees' faces, fish and laugh when their drawings change shape with the shifting light. And here's your historical nugget. The Haida and other First Nations along the Pacific coast became master carvers of stories in the centuries that followed. Totem poles rose like memory trees, each figure stacked upon the next, to tell history not in lines but in layers. Light allowed detail. Detail invited narrative. And now that there's a sun, everything has a surface, a color, a story. Raven watches a young boy carve a fish into driftwood, his small fingers tracing scales with new purpose. The bird tilts his head, considering, then casually drops a feather, letting it drift down beside the child like a forgotten thought. You lie back and wonder, how does one live in a world that's changed overnight? Because not everyone is happy. The hunters complain that prey sees them coming now. The elders say the new heat makes the smoked fish spoil faster. And some insist the darkness was more honest, that you knew where you stood when you couldn't see your own face. Historians still debate whether the raven myth reflects the human shift from nomadic to settled life. The story arrives in tandem with the dawn of agriculture, the rise of fixed villages, and the invention of timekeeping. Some say it's not about light, it's about order, about the messy business of organizing your life when the world has edges. But let's be honest, Raven wasn't thinking about any of that. He just wanted to cause a scene. And boy did he, you walk toward the coast, your shadow trailing behind you like a shy dog. Ravens fly overhead, dozens of them now, each trying to look like the raven. Some caw dramatically, some mimic voices. One lands beside you and says, "Nice weather we're having," before stealing your sandwich. Classic Raven. The people begin to tell stories, not just of the theft itself, but of what came after. How Raven didn't just bring light, he brought change. And as every elder knows, change is the beginning of everything. They say Raven's feathers still glow at dawn. They say he hides bits of sun under his tongue, dropping flecks now and then to remind people who gave it to them. Others say the light wasn't stolen at all, that the old man let Raven take it, because even guardians tire of guarding. Still, others claim Raven just found the light, that someone else had left it behind, that maybe Raven was never real and the light came on its own. But those are just theories. You and I both know what really happened. A bird got bored, and the sky has been interesting ever since. You wake to the sound of gulls squabbling above a tide pool, their wings slicing sunlight like it's something solid. The world is brighter now, comfortably so. The first shock of Raven's gift has softened into something steady. Trees sway in rhythm with the sea breeze, casting elegant shadows across the sand. And yet not everyone has fully settled into this new arrangement. Raven, of course, is bored again. It didn't take long. He perches atop a weathered spruce, 1 foot tucked under him, staring at the calm sea. His feathers no longer burn with golden light, but you can still see it, faint like a memory, in the glint of his eye. He's waiting, not for applause, not for thanks, just the next mess to make. Down below, the people are trying to name things. That's one of the first instincts that comes with light, the urge to label. This is a mountain. That's a cedar. These are clouds. That thing on your face. Oh, that's what your nose looks like. Yikes. The world has become visible, and visibility demands explanation. You watch as a group of villagers sit in a sunlit circle, gesturing at objects and assigning sounds to them. They disagree on most things. One woman insists that Taga means fire. Another swears it means fish. A child laughs and calls everything Taga just to cause trouble. That kid definitely Raven's spirit sibling. Meanwhile, the trickster himself is working on something new. He's noticed a curious phenomenon. The light that once sat so neatly in his feathers that rose obediently into the sky now moves on its own. At first slowly, then with confidence, it arcs. Up in the morning, down at night. Raven squints at the sky as the sun slides toward the horizon, trailing long shadows over the forest canopy. What once felt like a permanent escape from darkness now has its own rhythm. Day comes, and then night returns, not total blackness, not like before, but a cool, silvery dusk that deepens into stars. Raven is intrigued, slightly insulted. How dare the sun move without consulting him? So he follows it. He flies west, chasing the orb as it dips into the sea. When it vanishes, he dives low, scouring the waves as if it must have dropped like a stone. He pecks at a floating log, peers beneath a wave, finds nothing but moonlight. Wait, moonlight. There it is. A cool, quiet glow rising from the eastern edge of the sky, pale and ghostly, not golden like the sun, but silver-white, soft and mysterious. Raven cocks his head. He did not put that there. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some Haida variations, Raven didn't just steal the sun, he later went back to the old man's house and stole the moon and stars too. Some versions say they were in separate boxes. Others say the box held layers like a nesting puzzle. Either way, Raven wasn't done. You watch as Raven wheels back inland, curiosity crackling like fire through his feathers. He returns to the longhouse, not the one where he was born, but another. Older. Empty. And within it, more boxes. Still sealed. Still humming faintly like a song half remembered. He knows what to do this time. He doesn't cry, doesn't pretend to be a baby, doesn't shapeshift into anything ridiculous. He just walks up casually like he owns the place and opens them. First, the moon. It escapes slowly like breath, not in a rush. The moon has never been about speed. It slides from the box and hovers above the floor, pulsing with a sleepy, steady rhythm. Raven blinks as its glow brushes his beak. Not warm, not cold, just calm. He tosses it into the sky like a pebble. Then comes the third box. This one rattles when he touches it. He opens it, and 100 sparks leap out, scattering in all directions. Tiny flecks of light, sharp and giggly. Raven shrieks, dodging one as it zips past his eye. Another lands on his back and sizzles. The stars, it seems, are not tame. You follow them up. They settle in the sky wherever they please. No pattern, no symmetry, just joy and randomness. Some blink, some shimmer. One refuses to stop twitching, but together they fill the night with wonder. And now the people can sleep. Historians still argue whether this part of the Raven myth represents the Indigenous mapping of the constellations. Some say the stories encode navigational clues, the shape of the coastline mirrored in the sky. Others claim the stars were simply metaphors, each one a spirit ancestor or joke told in permanent ink. But whatever they mean, the people love them. They begin to tell stories by starlight. They sit beside fire pits and describe what each twinkle means. Children ask which star belongs to Raven. Elders pretend not to know, but their eyes sparkle with mischief. the world has grown bigger. Raven sits on a boulder watching the night sky he accidentally curated. The sun is gone for now. The moon keeps watch. The stars scatter their secrets. And yet, he's still not full, because Raven never is. You lie back in the grass, shadowed now, and close your eyes to the sound of waves lapping against a starlit shore. Somewhere above the trickster rustles his feathers, plotting, always. You wake just before dawn, head cradled in a soft bed of moss, and everything is quiet, but not the kind of silence that comes from absence. This silence hums. It waits. The moon has drifted west, paling with every breath you take, and the stars begin to blink out one by one, as if shy about being caught still awake. And then, softly, like a hand brushing your cheek, the light returns. It begins as a whisper at the edge of the sea. A bruised ribbon of lavender and peach, stretching across the horizon like a promise. You sit up, breath held. The treetops are still dark, but their outlines return. The world is stitching itself back together. The sun peeks over the ocean, and you feel it not just on your skin, but inside your ribs, like something old and warm coming home. But not everyone is rejoicing. Far up the coast, Bear grumbles. He's not angry. Well, okay, he's always a little angry, but mostly confused, because for the first time, his winter sleep was interrupted by brightness. Dreams that were once velvet and endless were suddenly pierced by beams of gold stabbing through the cracks of his den. He lumbers out into the daylight, blinking and snorting, and who does he see perched on a log nearby Raven? Feathers sleek, beak smug, looking unbearably pleased with himself. Bear grunts. What did you do? Raven spreads his wings and shrugs. Improved the view. Bear glares, because now he has questions. Why is the river warm when it shouldn't be? Why are the fish hiding in deeper water? Why are squirrels waking up and throwing pine cones at his head? The forest isn't behaving, it's evolving, and Bear suspects Raven is at the center of it. And here comes your historical nugget, Pacific Northwest. Indigenous cosmologies often placed animals as co-creators of the world, not in a fairy tale way, but as literal participants in shaping geography, climate, and behavior. In Haida culture, Bear was both respected and feared, a symbol of strength, hunger, and natural law. And Bear does not appreciate having his law messed with, so he calls a meeting at the edge of the river, where light sparkles like fish scales, and the moss is still wet with dew. The animals gather. One by one, cautious, curious, yawning. Wolf arrives, first ears twitching. Otter rolls in, still laughing from whatever dream she just woke from. Eagle lands, last wings sharp against the light. They all glance up at the sky, now painted in pastels. They squint at the shadows, and then they stare at Raven, who is, of course, pretending to be preoccupied with a beetle. "I brought you the sun," he says nonchalantly. Wolf growls. "No one asked you to." Otter flips onto her back. "I think it's fabulous." Bear huffs. It's a disruption. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some lesser-known versions of the Raven myth, the animals hold a trial. They demand Raven explain himself, argue about whether his theft was a gift or a trespass. In one version, they vote to break the sun apart and share it among them. In another, they just end up dancing. This version, they negotiate. After all, this new world isn't going away. So they decide light will be shared. Raven snorts. Good luck dividing a sky, but they do. Eagle, who flies the highest, suggests the day should belong to those who soar. Hawks, gulls, crows, and kin. Wolf, ever the moon watcher, claims the night. Otter volunteers to make twilight her playground because of course she does. Bear just demands uninterrupted naps. And so a schedule is born: sunrise, midday, sunset and night. The sky becomes a cycle, a rhythm, a clock. But nothing is perfect. There are cloudy days, stormy nights, moments when the light hides or refuses to behave. And the animals, like people, learn to adjust. Some become nocturnal, some bask, some hoard warmth like treasure. Raven just watches it all unfold, delighted that his prank has turned into policy. Historians still debate whether these animal councils represent real social governance metaphors. Some claim the myths encoded early environmental management, how humans and animals share resources, space and time. Others see it as symbolic reconciliation between chaos, Raven, and order, bear-wolf, eagle. But if you asked Raven, he'd say it was just funny. You follow him now as he skips along a tide pool, picking up shiny rocks and shiny gossip. The animals are adjusting, the people are adapting. The world has gone from a single dark note to an entire symphony of light, shadow and shimmer. And yet Raven still isn't full. He's starting to wonder. What about the other lights? You find yourself drifting beside the tide, where morning mist still clings to driftwood like old ghosts reluctant to leave. The village is stirring, fires crackle, voices murmur, and the new sunlight makes everything seem a little too real. Brightness, it turns out, doesn't just reveal beauty, it also shows the mess. Cracks in longhouse walls, rotten baskets, that one uncle with the suspicious mole on his shoulder. Raven naturally is unfazed. You spot him high on a branch, fluffing his feathers with the kind of satisfaction only a trickster can summon after stealing a celestial object and disrupting the entire order of existence. But even as he watches the people stumble into their new, illuminated lives, he knows the real mischief isn't finished yet, because although he's released the sun away, you remember the orb had layers, the box had secrets. There were rules, and Raven only ever follows those if they can be turned upside down and turned into confetti. One night, not long after the Animal Council divides the sky, Raven decides to test a theory. He waits until everyone sleeps. The sun has dipped below the mountains. The stars blink lazily overhead. The moon, his silvery sibling, is hanging at its peak, throwing soft light over the cedar roots. And then from under his wing, Raven pulls out a piece of the sun, just a sliver, a glowing ember no bigger than a pebble. You watch him toss it into the air like a coin. It hangs there briefly as if unsure whether to rise or fall. And then just like that it floats and glows. The light is soft, steady, golden, but with a gentler edge. It doesn't scorch like the full sun. It doesn't cast hard shadows. It glows like memory, like a lullaby. Raven's eyes gleam. He's just invented the dawn. Not the sunrise which charges onto the stage each morning like a drunk actor tripping over curtains, but dawn, that delicate prelude, the first hush before the orchestra. And what does he do next? He cries, loudly, sharply, like a baby again, just like before. The sound pierces the forest. The birds wake first, confused and angry, then the people grumbling from their sleeping mats. Children whimper, elders swear. And then, because memory is shorter than it should be, someone says, "He's doing it again." The old man appears at the edge of the clearing, wrapped in a blanket, eyes narrowed. He knows that sound, that tone. He's heard it in the womb on the roof, and now again at the edge of sleep. And sure enough, there's Raven, crying by the fire pit feathers must, acting as if the world has wounded him deeply. The people gather. One brave auntie steps forward. What's wrong now? Raven flops dramatically to the side, points with one wing to the glowing ember above them. He squawks, "Too small!" They blink. Someone whispers, "Did he keep part of the sun for himself?" The old man groans. And here comes your mainstream historical nugget. In many Haida narratives, Raven's release of the sun was incomplete, not out of cruelty, but caution or mischief, depending on the storyteller. The idea that celestial forces weren't all unleashed at once reflects a real-world understanding of seasonal change, particularly the shifting length and quality of light in northern climates. And that sliver, that floating ember, it doesn't disappear. In fact, each morning it appears again, just ahead of sunrise, a warm golden glow. The first light, the people name it. Some call it Ska Windawa, the light before light. Others call it Raven's remorse. A few prefer the one that got away. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some versions of the tale Raven's retained, sun fragment was eventually stolen from him by another trickster, sometimes a mink, sometimes a cloud. But Raven, being Raven, always gets the last laugh, or at least the last word. He circles the village, now humming to himself. Not singing exactly, just a rhythmic croak that vibrates through the branches. It's the sound of satisfaction mixed with possibility. A song made of question marks, because if he could steal the sun, what about other things like color or warmth or, oh yes, sound? You follow him as he flies to the riverbank where a group of children are skipping stones. Their laughter echoes across the water. Raven pauses, watching, then lands nearby. He tilts his head, listens, and slowly begins to mimic. One child laughs, Raven copies it. Another gasps, Raven repeats it, slightly exaggerated. Soon he's creating sounds no one made. Echoes of things unsaid, half laughter, bent syllables. The kind of sounds that crawl inside your dreams and hide behind your thoughts. The children love it. They copy him. He copies them. Together they loop each other into nonsense phrases and animal noises. Somewhere in that chaos, Raven invents voice. And that's the part many forget. Raven didn't just bring light. He brought story, the power to speak, to shape, to share. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth evolved later. Was Raven always a cosmic thief, or did later storytellers inflate his resume? Some point to parallels with the Prometheus myth. Others suggest it reflects the growing importance of oral tradition where speech itself became sacred. But to you, lying back beneath the ember glow of Raven's leftover light, none of that matters. You close your eyes. And Raven croaks something unintelligible, but it sounds like laughter. You're lying on a slope of sun-warmed stones, belly full of smoked fish eyes, half-lidded under a generous stretch of blue sky. The sun, now comfortably settled into its daily loop, has grown familiar. Predictable, soothing even, but somewhere overhead the sky stirs. A shadow flickers, then another, and then you see it just barely Raven sweeping across the sky like a smudge of ink on a golden canvas. He's not in a rush. He loops, he twirls, he lets the wind buffet his wings with playful swerves. There's something in his claws. He's holding the sun again. Not all of it, of course, just the residue, the heat, the glow, the story. His feathers blaze faintly as he tucks the light deeper beneath his wing, a sly grin in his eye. You wonder how much of it he's still hiding. You wonder if he even knows, because Raven never just gives, he leaks, and now he's flying higher. The village below begins to point. Some children scream in delight, others duck and cover, uncertain whether this is another theft in progress or a casual stunt. And Raven, ever the performer, lets the sun peek from his wingtip just enough to cast an exaggerated glowing silhouette. He flaps once, twice, and the sky explodes into colour. It's not literal, not like fireworks. It's more like something clicks. The quality of light shifts, the shadows deepen, the air grows sharp and bright and full of motion. You realize Raven isn't just showing off, he's leaving fast. You scramble up and follow with your eyes. He is rising higher than the treetops, higher than the mountain peaks, above the gulls, the eagles, the clouds. And behind him, the sun rises too, no longer cradled in his feathers, but following him like a loyal pet or a challenge. He darts eastward toward the edge of the known world, the light trailing him like golden thread unraveling across the morning. This is his escape. This is his legacy. This is the sky-born getaway. And here's your historical tidbit in Haida mythic geography. The sky is not just above, it's layered, worlds upon worlds. Some stories say Raven escaped not just into the air, but into another realm entirely, the upper world, the beyond, a place of ancestors or spirits or light untouched by earth. And yet he's still visible, just barely. You squint into the light, watching as he zigzags away. The path he takes isn't straight, it wobbles, dips, teases. Raven never flies in a line. Why go direct when you can make a dance of it? He twists between clouds, loops back just long enough to drop a feather that flutters glowing into a tide pool. Then he's off again, dodging invisible currents, riding updrafts with the glee of someone who knows they're not supposed to be here. Some say he flew too close to the sun and singed his wings. Some say he flew inside it. Some say he became part of it. All you know is that the sky hasn't been the same since. Back on the ground, the people stare upward, shielding their eyes. The elders murmur that this is what happens when you give a rascal the keys to the sky. The children shout, "Do it again," while the dogs bark and chase their own shadows. Raven is gone but not gone. His laughter echoes faintly. It rides the wind, slides down the branches, skims the water's surface like a skipped stone. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some Haida carvers depicted Raven mid-flight, with the sun tucked beneath his wing, an almost comic image beak, open feathers, chaotic legs flailing. Others showed him dignified wings, wide sun balanced perfectly in his grasp. The style always depended on the storyteller and storytelling. That's Raven's favorite flight pattern. You lie back on the hillside again, letting the warmth spread across your limbs. Above you, the sun now moves of its own accord, slowly, majestically, but always with a little wobble at sunrise and sunset, as if it remembers Raven's grip and hasn't quite found its balance without him. Historians still puzzle over the symbolism. Was the sky an escape route, a metaphor for liberation, or was it Raven's final prank to fly away and let people wonder whether he'd ever return? You close your eyes, the wind brushing your cheeks. Far, far above you, think you hear the beat of wings, or maybe it's just your breath. Either way, Raven's somewhere in the sky, and he's smiling. The sun has settled into a rhythm now, no longer needing Raven to coax it along. It rises, it sets. It paints the mountains gold and the sea silver. The people have learned to wake with it, to rest beneath its fading edge. Children now draw circles for day crescents for night, and everywhere the shadows fall, stories bloom like mushrooms after rain. But light, once loosed, doesn't only illuminate, it reveals. You walk through the village where driftwood houses lean into the morning with open doorways. Smoke curls from cedar roofs. Laughter echoes down from fish racks where salmon strips glisten like stained glass. It's peaceful, almost ordinary, until you reach the beach. There a group of elders stands facing the ocean. Eyes wide, mouths slightly open, no one speaks, you follow their gaze. Out on the water where the sunlight meets the waves, something sparkles. Not a reflection, not a school of fish. Something moving, a line of light thin as thread but pulsing traces across the sea. As if the sun itself has cast a tether, and high above it a shape. Wings! A familiar silhouette. It's Raven, again. Of course, he's not finished. He never is. He's hovering just beyond the reach of land, just beyond explanation. And what he's doing now, well, it's a little different. He's dropping pieces. Bits of the sun, or at least bits of something bright, are falling from his feathers like sparks from a fire. They hit the ocean and vanish, plink, plink, gone, until they're not. The waves begin to shimmer in response, and then will rise. A ripple forms, not a wave exactly, but a shape within the wave. Fluid glowing, twisting upward like a spiral, then another, then dozens. You and the elders step back, heartbeats rising. From the ocean, something climbs. Not a creature, not quite, but light, shaped into scales and fins and eyes that see too much. Creatures of shimmer, fish that flicker like stars, jellyfish pulsing with the rhythm of the sky, a turtle with a shell that mirrors the moon. They rise just briefly and then vanish again beneath the waves. The ocean now holds light, not borrowed from the sky, not reflected, its own. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Among coastal First Nations, particularly the Haida, the sea was as sacred as the forest. Oral traditions describe the ocean not as a boundary, but a second sky, another realm with its own laws and ancestors. To illuminate the sea wasn't metaphorical, it was cosmological. Some believed light had to enter the water so life below could awaken too. Raven naturally takes credit. You hear him cackle from the clouds. He flaps in a lazy circle as if admiring his work. The ocean glows for hours afterward, not constantly, but in pulses. It gleams when the tide changes. It flickers at night when the moon touches it. It learns to breathe in light. Soon after, the people notice the difference. Fish seem easier to find. Shells gleam even after they're plucked from the sand. And some claim the sea sings now, low and wordless, but undeniably musical. Raven's touch is everywhere, but not everyone is thrilled. One old man stands with arms crossed, muttering, "We were just getting used to sun." Now the water sparkles. Another elder nods grimly. He's making it up as he goes, and here's your quirky tidbit. In some of the less told tales, Raven is accused of overdoing it, of meddling too far. One version tells of a time he tried to make the mountains glow and accidentally melted the snow caps. In another, he paints light into trees and causes the leaves to stay green forever until Eagle intervenes and invents autumn. Even Raven has his limits. Or rather, others begin setting them for him. You lie back on the beach, listening to the tide, lap the sand glowing faintly in the moonlight. The stars blink gently above you, and Raven's silhouette drifts farther out over the sea wings, spread like parentheses in a sentence only he understands. Historians still argue whether this myth reflects an early ecological worldview given not just to humans but shared among all living systems. Others say it's simply a poetic way to explain bioluminescence or the shimmer of fish scales at dawn. But maybe it's just Raven being Raven, always pushing, always prodding, always asking, what else can shine? You close your eyes, lulled by wave and wonder. And somewhere just over the horizon, Raven laughs again. You open your eyes just as the sun crests the horizon, brighter now but softer somehow, as if even it has settled into the idea of being shared. The world around you is golden. Everything glows from the dew on the grass to the delicate strands of spiderweb strung like tiny harps between ferns. You're not the only one noticing. All across the coast, life stirs with a new kind of awareness. The people begin to name the days. They track the sun's path with carved sticks mark seasons with notches on whalebone. A boy draws a circle in the sand and says, "This is where it rose today." His sister adds a pebble, then a second. The ritual begins, and suddenly, miraculously, it has a name. Dawn. The word catches, it spreads, first in whispers, then in songs. You hear it spoken beside cooking fires and carved into the corners of canoes. The world, it seems, is organizing itself around the rhythm Raven accidentally or not so accidentally set loose. But something else is changing too. Color. It arrives slowly. First in glimmers on fish scales, in bird feathers, in the shells buried beneath the sand. Then in the trees where leaves begin to shift from mossy green to glinting amber. Even the rocks, long believed to be grey and dull, reveal streaks of blue and rose in the sunlight. People stare and gasp, and Raven, he pretends not to notice. Perched on a nearby pole, he preens his wing, casually adjusting a feather that just happens to shimmer with iridescence now. He did this. Probably. Or maybe light did it. Or maybe it was always there and darkness just covered it like a dust sheet over an old painting. Still, Raven watches the world see itself clearly for the first time, and he laughs because the real trick wasn't stealing the sun, it was making everyone look. And here's your mainstream historical fact. The introduction of light in Indigenous mythologies often coincides with the awakening of perception, an encoded explanation for how humans began to distinguish color, shape, shadow. In many Pacific Northwest cultures, this moment marks the start of art. Carving, painting, weaving expressions that could only exist once the people could see in full. And oh, do they express! You wander through the village now where the once plain long houses have begun to transform. Faces emerge in the wooden beams, spirits, animals, ancestors. The red pigment of crushed ochre, the blue-green of copper salts. Totems rise like dream towers, each figure stacked with meaning. One pole shows raven wings, outstretched sun clutched like a stolen fruit. Another shows him dropping its feathers on fire. A third shows nothing but a beak open in eternal laughter. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some of the earliest Haida carvings feature odd exaggerated elements like raven with 12 fingers or sunbeams shaped like fish. Scholars believe these distortions weren't mistakes but artistic reminders. Myth bends reality, and tricksters never sit still long enough to be captured faithfully. The people gather beneath the totems each evening, telling the story again and again. Each version adds something. In one, Raven coughs up the sun after choking on a salmon bone. In another, he drops it and blames Eagle. In a third, he denies everything and says it was actually his brother Mink who did it while he was sleeping. No one agrees, but everyone listens. You sit among them, wrapped in a blanket that smells of cedar smoke, watching a grandmother trace Raven's flight in the air with her wrinkled hands. Her voice lilts, dip soars. The children's eyes go wide, even the adults lean in, because somehow the sun is still being stolen every time the story is told. And Raven is nearby, always. You spot him hopping between the driftwood logs, listening, head tilted, beak shut, but twitching with amusement. At one point he lets out a small that could mean you've got it wrong, or close enough, or maybe I invented fire too. But nobody thanks me for that. Historians still argue whether these communal storytelling gatherings were literal religious ceremonies or just cultural glue ways of reinforcing values, cosmology, and social structure through shared myth. But to you, sitting under a sky that burns orange and melts into violet, it feels like both. A prayer and a prank, a memory and a map. And somewhere in the soft shadows, Raven rustles his wings again. Not to leave, just to remind you he could. You lie back on the carved bench, the scent of salmon hanging in the air, and drift towards sleep as the last light fades behind the mountain tops. And in the dark, the sky still glows. Night settles gently over the village. Not the smothering darkness of the old world, but a night shaped by contrast, cool against warmth, silver against gold. The moon rises calm and expectant, casting quiet light across cedar rooftops and polished river stones. You can hear waves washing ashore with a rhythm so familiar now it almost feels like breath. But tonight, something's different. The children are quiet. They sit around the fire, eyes wide, watching the shadows dance on the longhouse walls. One of them points suddenly. Look, a shape, long and jagged, crawls across the planks. It twists with the flickering firelight. Another child gasps. It's moving. The adults laugh softly. It's just your shadow. But the children aren't convinced. And honestly, you're not either, because these new shadows, born of the sun Raven released, don't always behave. They twitch when no one moves. They stretch too far. They hide behind trees when the fire dims. And sometimes they seem to be listening. The people gather to talk about it. Some say it's harmless, just part of this new world. Others think it's Raven's doing, again some leftover trick he's smuggled in with the light. A quiet woman with painted hands murmurs, "Maybe shadows are what the light pushes out of us." That makes everyone pause. You lie back and let your own shadow fall behind you. It follows the curve of your spine. It touches nothing, but feels like it touches everything. Not cold, not warm, just there. And here's your mainstream historical fact across cultures. The appearance of shadows in mythology often mark the arrival of consciousness. Before shadows, everything simply was. After shadows, there was self-awareness, distinction, a sense of me and not me. For the Haida, the interplay between light and shadow mirrored the duality present in many of their legends, truth and trickery, creation and chaos. Raven knew this, of course. He didn't just bring light, he brought contrast. You watch as the fire crackles its glow, pushing the shadows in and out of form. And above the stars blink with rhythmic patience. The night is no longer a void, it has shape now, movement, mood. And that mood tonight is mystery. Raven perches in a nearby spruce, unusually quiet. He's watching the shadows too, because even he didn't expect this. He thought the sun would bring joy, vision, color, maybe some chaos. But he hadn't accounted for this third thing, the strange twin that clings to everything light touches. He tilts his head and calls once softly. His own shadow moves with a curious delay. That's new. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some fringe versions of the Raven myth claim that when Raven stole the sun, he also accidentally created shadow spirits, beings of light's aftermath. Tricksters in their own right, these beings linger just behind reality, mimicking us, imperfectly learning as they go. You feel it now. The weight of being seen by the light, yes, but also followed, mirrored. The people begin to act differently. Some walk slower, watching their shadows behave. Others leap and spin, laughing as their dark selves echo the gesture. A few whisper warnings into their own silhouettes, unsure whether they're giving instructions or receiving them. And still, Raven watches. Then, ever so slowly, he opens his wings and dives, not far, just enough to brush the firelight to throw his shape large across the village square. The children shriek in delight, chasing his silhouette with outstretched hands. Raven's shadow flickers across walls, poles, baskets. It blends and slips and stretches unnaturally long before slinking back beneath his perch. The lesson is subtle, but unmistakable. If the sun brings light and light brings vision, then vision must always come with its shadow. You sit with that thought nestled between breath and fire. Historians still debate whether the Haida concept of duality was always part of the Raven myth, or whether it evolved over time to explain deeper ideas about psychology, morality, or storytelling itself. Some suggest that shadow lore emerged as a way to discuss death. Others think it was simply a way to make children behave after dark. But one thing is certain. The world is never just one thing now. It is always at least two, you and your shadow, light and what it leaves behind, Raven and whatever follows him. You watch the fire die down, embers fading into soft red dust. The night hushes again, but not fully. The moon rises higher, the stars gather closer, and your shadow curls around your feet like a loyal animal, silent, dark, waiting. Raven flutters once more into the trees, satisfied. For now. The next morning arrives with a hush rather than a blaze. The sun spills across the treetops in thin threads, like it's trying not to wake the forest too abruptly. Birds chirp in polite, tentative bursts. Even Raven, normally up early to critique the dawn, like an over-involved stage director, stays unusually quiet. Why? Because the animals have arrived. Not just one or two. Not just Bear, who's always grumbling, or Otter, who shows up when there's a promise of snacks. This time, they all come. They trickle in from the woods, from riverbanks, from mountain paths. They gather in the clearing near the village with paws, claws, hooves, and webbed feet. Beaks clack, tails twitch, eyes gleam. You've never seen so many creatures in one place, and they're not here for a nap. They're here for answers, because the world has changed, and they'd like a say in it. And they're perched on the central totem like he belongs. In every story carved into its sides is Raven, head high, chest puffed, eyes gleaming. Ah, he croaks as if he'd totally expected this and not just woken up with feathers in disarray. Welcome to my office. The animals do not laugh. Bear speaks first. You changed the sky, Otter adds, and the sea. Eagle chimes in, and the way fish behave. Even squirrel joins in, twitching nervously. I lost 3 acorns because I mistimed the shadows. The murmurs grow louder because now that there's light, time is different. The rhythms of hunger, hunting, sleep all altered. Day lasts too long for some, too short for others. The old balance, once dictated by instinct and moon cycles, has been rewritten, and they want a new deal. So naturally they demand stories, not apologies, not instructions, stories, because the only way to make sense of chaos, especially raven-shaped chaos, is to tell it into order. And here's your historical fact across Haida and other Pacific Northwest indigenous cultures. Animals were central figures in oral storytelling. These weren't animal tales for children. They were legal, spiritual and social blueprints, myths that encoded hunting rites, seasonal rituals and environmental wisdom. Raven, already preening, flutters down from the totem pole and lands with theatrical grace. "Fine," he says, "but I want something in return." The animals groan. Of course he does. He demands that each species trade something, a trait, a gift, a habit. In return, he'll share a tale, one for each woven from the world he's now helped improve. Thank you very much. Bear reluctantly offers his silence, agreeing to let Raven speak uninterrupted. No small feat. Otter offers laughter, Eagle offers his sharp gaze, even Snail, who arrives late and breathless, offers his patience. Raven nods. Very well, he begins. And so the first council of stories is born. Each animal listens, tail curled or wings folded as Raven spins. He doesn't just describe events, he animates them. The sun is a drum, the moon is a bowl of tears, the stars are sparks from an old fire pit deep beneath the ocean. Shadows. Oh, those are the night's sticky jokes. His stories are full of flair, exaggeration, frequent self-flattery, and zero concern for logical consistency. But they work. The animals begin to see their world more clearly, not because it suddenly makes sense, but because it's been shaped into meaning. Even when Raven contradicts himself 3 times in the same tale, they nod. Because that's how the world feels now, shimmering, uneven, full of surprise. And here's your quirky tidbit. One lesser-known variation of the Raven myth describes this animal council as the moment the world gained roles. After the stories were told, animals knew what they were. Bear became the keeper of dreams. Otter was named guardian of play. Raven predictably declared himself director of everything unexpected. You sit at the edge of the clearing, half hidden by a mossy log, listening. Each tale is a little wild, a little wise, a little off-kilter. And by the time Raven finishes, the animals don't complain anymore. Because somehow, without asking their permission, Raven has turned them into characters, heroes, tricksters, spirits. He's written them into the world. And the world, like a good story, feels bigger now. Historians still discuss whether the animal roles in these myths were used to teach children behavioral expectations or whether they reflected real ecological observations. Why does Bear sleep so long? Why is Otter always wriggling? Myth became a bridge between the observable and the poetic. As the council disperses one by one, each animal returns to its habitat, carrying a new version of itself. Bear walks a little taller. Otter giggles with even more flair. Eagle soars with a hint of drama. And Raven, he lingers. He always does. He watches them leave and mutters, "Told you they'd love it." Then he stretches his wings, flaps once, and lifts into the air, casting a crooked, shimmering shadow across the clearing. You stay behind, watching the light change as he disappears into it. Somewhere deep in the woods, a new story is already forming. You wake to a strange quiet, not the peaceful kind like birdsong at sunrise or the hush of snow falling on pine needles. This quiet is curious, expectant, like the forest is holding its breath. You sit up on your mossy bed and feel it immediately. Something has changed, not in the trees, not in the rivers or the stones, in the sky. It looks different. Not darker, not stormy, just unfamiliar. You step out into the village and everyone else is looking up too. Old men squint, children gasp. Someone drops a cooking spoon into the fire. Above you, the sky is striped. Wide bands of color arc across the heavens like paint spilled by a giant child. Rose, lavender, turquoise, gold, all stretched into sweeping trails that shimmer and shift with each passing moment. They pulse, they move. Someone mutters, "It's like the sky is breathing," and you know without needing to ask that Raven's been up to something again. You turn slowly, scanning the horizon, and sure enough, there he is. Perched atop the highest totem in the village, wings half-spread, eyes gleaming with theatrical innocence. What he says, as though this wasn't obviously his fault. And here's your historical anchor. What you're seeing are the Northern Lights, the Haida, along with other indigenous cultures of the Pacific Northwest and Arctic, often interpreted aurora borealis not as mere weather or magnetic phenomena, but as signs, messages, or spirits dancing across the sky. Some said they were the breath of ancestors, others believed them to be the movement of souls, or great sky spirits hunting among the stars. But in this version, it's just Raven, or so he says. He caws loudly and flutters into the air, doing a wide, slow circle around the village. As he flies, the colors ripple behind him, flowing like ribbons from his wings. He's not stealing the sun this time. He's decorating. And naturally he tells the people he invented this sky art for their benefit. The stars were too boring, he explains to a confused fisherman. Besides, I had some leftover shimmer. The villagers stare upward, wide-eyed. Some laugh, some whisper nervously. One woman gets teary-eyed and says the colors remind her of her grandmother's beadwork. A child tries to catch the lights in a woven basket. It doesn't work. But the basket glows faintly for a while. Now here's your quirky tidbit in a rare coastal tale. Raven is said to have tried painting the sky with whale oil and crushed mussel shells intending to make it shimmer. The story ends badly with a ruined cloak and half the moon smeared with soot, but the implication is clear. Raven wants beauty on his own terms. No stars, he'll make his own. Back in the village, people begin dancing. First, just one boy spinning under the sky with arms outstretched. Then his sister joins, then their cousins. Soon a circle forms. Drums are fetched. Songs bubble up, some old, some brand new, created on the spot with nonsense syllables and too much enthusiasm. Raven watches from a tree branch, grinning. You get the sense? This is the part he likes best, not the heist, not the bragging, but this, the reaction, the ripple effect, the way a single trick can stir music from the stones and turn the sky into a performance. And here's your scholarly debate moment. Some ethnographers argue that these visual myths, the ones describing Raven, altering the very appearance of the cosmos, evolved later as communities processed unusual natural phenomena. Others think the stories were there from the start, handed down through generations who saw magic not as an exception, but the rule. Either way, Raven doesn't wait around to be thanked. He does one final loop through the sky, then dips low over the treetops, letting a single black feather fall. It spins lazily in the moonlight before landing near your foot, still warm with some strange energy. You pick it up. It smells faintly of cedar smoke salt and mischief. A few days later the lights fade. The sky returns to its usual starlit hush. But the people keep looking up, just in case. And sometimes, very late at night, a flicker returns. Faint, playful, like a wink from someone just off stage. Raven doesn't say if it's him, but you know. The stars are out tonight, bright, sharp, a little too symmetrical. You lie back against a cedar log, staring up through a canopy that now feels thin, almost transparent. The sky stretches like skin over something immense and unknowable. And in that sky, twinkling just a little too deliberately, you start to notice patterns. Not constellations exactly, not yet, but clumps, clusters, lines. It begins innocently enough. A child says that star looks like a fish. Someone else squints and says, no, it's Raven's beak. Another points and insists the stars are forming a canoe. Raven naturally overhears all this, and he perks up, because there's nothing he loves more than people taking something vague and assigning it meaning. He waits until just after midnight, when the fire has burned down and most villagers are asleep. Then he swoops silently above the clearing, feathers barely disturbing the air, and begins rearranging the sky. That's right. You watch as Raven dips a wing and nudges a star a little to the left, then another. He flaps upward and shoves two stars together like a child clapping seashells. When he's done, he glides backward, admiring his work like a birdish Picasso. You blink, the stars now form a giant raven. Of course they do. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Indigenous cultures of the Pacific Northwest did not all follow classical Greco-Roman constellations, but they did map their own symbolic systems into the night sky. Some clans saw fish traps, canoes, or bear tracks in the stars. These constellations guided travel, marked seasons, and told sacred stories woven into timekeeping and ceremony. But this is just Raven being extra. The villagers wake the next morning confused. Some claim they dreamt of feathers falling like stars. Others swear the sky felt closer than usual. The astronomer, okay, more like the guy who stares up a lot, claims the stars moved. Don't be ridiculous, says an elder, even as she nervously eyes the perfectly shaped outline of wings above her longhouse. And here's your quirky tidbit in a fringe Haida tale. Known mainly through oral retellings, Raven becomes jealous of the moon for having tides under its control. So he tries to collect stars for himself, storing them in a pouch. He spills them mid-flight, and they become constellations' accidental art, like glitter you can't unspill. Back in the present, the children begin connecting the dots. Literally, they use twigs to draw patterns in the dirt, tracing the new star shapes. A boy names one Sky Otter. A girl insists hers is the bear who lost his pants. Raven hears this and laughs so hard he falls off his perch. More patterns appear the next night. This time, someone notices a spiral. Someone else sees a fishhook. One elder points out a line of stars that matches the curve of the coast, and soon others join in, mapping stars to rivers, islands, even hunting paths. The night sky becomes a second version of the world. You lie beneath it, imagining the stars not as far-off suns, but as punctuation marks in a story told in reverse. The sky is no longer a ceiling, it's a mirror. And who shaped it? Raven, obviously. He doesn't deny it. He just raises one wing dramatically and says, "You're welcome," before fluttering off to rearrange two particularly stubborn stars that keep drifting apart like divorced cousins at a potlatch. Historians still argue whether Indigenous star mapping was systematic or intuitive, whether patterns in the sky were recorded through generations with mathematical precision, or passed fluidly from grandmother to grandchild through stories and song. But the result is the same. Navigation, time, identity, myth. The stars are now more than decoration. They are instructions, legends, proof that something has been up there, scribbling nonsense into wisdom. And somewhere above you, Raven draws a new line between two unfamiliar stars. You squint. It looks like a fish, a canoe. No, it's a feather, of course. You smile and close your eyes, the after-image of starlight, flickering against your lids like a lantern behind paper. The sky shifts again quietly just before sleep takes you. Raven is still drawing. The fire crackles softly beside you, its glow painting the sides of the long house with golden waves. It's later than you usually stay awake, but no one is sleeping yet. Tonight, something feels different. A hush falls as the storyteller steps forward. Not an elder this time, a girl, barely taller than a driftwood post. She clears her throat once, then again louder. Everyone turns, and she begins. Long ago, she says, when the stars were still hiding behind feathers, the moon didn't know how to find her way. The adults exchange glances. The moon lost. The girl continues, eyes wide, arms swaying as she speaks. She wandered the forest in secret. She glowed, yes, but faintly, like a shy ember. She didn't rise. She drifted. She had no pattern. She was afraid of the sun's boldness and Raven's tricks. You lean in, intrigued. You've never heard this one. She would curl into the roots of old trees and let her light spill into mushrooms or the bellies of frogs. That's why they glow sometimes, even now. The fire pops and a few listeners nod. A couple frogs in the shadows croak in approval. And one day, the girl continues, the moon came upon Raven. He was sitting beside a tide pool, painting his beak with crushed berries. He looked up, smirked. "Lost again, old friend," he said. She didn't answer, just stared with that glowing round face. "You need a purpose," he told her. "Something with shape, a rhythm. Otherwise you're just a floating night puddle." The audience chuckles. Raven stood, stretched, said, "Fine, I'll help." And that the girl declares is how the moon got her path. Raven didn't push her into orbit. He dared her, said, "Bet you can't circle the world without bumping into your own shadow." And she did. Again and again, to prove him wrong. And still does. You smile as the fire crackles louder, because this is how new myths are born. And here's your historical fact: oral storytelling in Haida culture wasn't a static tradition. It evolved constantly, adapting to new events, voices and audiences. Children were not just recipients of myth, but creators. A child's version of a tale might introduce an entirely new interpretation, which could enter the larger tradition if the community found it meaningful or memorable. And the moon, once just a quiet presence, becomes something more. In this girl's tale, a rival. A dancer, a slow, elegant answer to Raven's quicksilver chaos. You look up, and there she is, the moon, full tonight, suspended in the ink blue sky, wearing that same serene face, half wise, half bemused. She glows not with the sun's fire, but with her own quiet defiance. Raven is nowhere to be seen right now, but you know he's watching, probably from the branch of a fir tree, or a gap in the cloud, or the reflection in the tide pool. He hears the girl's story, he hears the laughter, and you can feel him preen with satisfaction. Because whether or not he actually dared the moon into orbit, he'll take credit. Naturally. Here's your quirky tidbit in some Haida stories. Raven claims he designed the moon after a shell round, smooth and mysterious. Others say the moon was a jealous cousin of the sun, and Raven only got involved when the two fought over who had better reflections in water. Some tales even suggest the moon asked Raven for help and then regretted it, because Raven wouldn't stop narrating her journey like a sportscaster. Still, the moon continues her graceful sweep across the sky, trailing silver across the forest floor. She doesn't need anyone's permission to shine now. You lie back in the grass arms behind your head, watching her glide. Around you the village settles, the fire dies low. The storyteller girl is asleep now, her cheek pressed against her own knee. And in the stillness the moonlight deepens. Historians may debate whether this daring the moon version ever existed before tonight, but does it really matter? Someone told it, someone listened, and now it lives. Somewhere high above, Raven chuckles to himself. Maybe the moon doesn't circle because she was dared. Maybe she just wanted to prove she could move with grace in a sky Raven filled with chaos. Either way, she shines. You wake in the small hours of the morning, that strange, soft hour when even time seems unsure of itself. The fire's embers pulse like sleeping hearts, and the longhouse is quiet, but not empty bodies curled under fur blankets, the occasional snore, the sigh of someone drifting through dreamland. But outside, something flickers. You step out quietly, the woven mat cool beneath your bare feet. The trees stand in silhouette, tall and hushed, their trunks painted silver by moonlight. The sea murmurs nearby, restless as ever. You expect to see stars, maybe the moon still low and heavy on her path. Instead, you see color. It weaves across the sky like a song without words, curtains of green and pink, flickering lavender, sudden stabs of gold that vanish before you can name them. The northern lights again, but brighter, more restless. And then you hear it, whispers, not words, not exactly, not language, just sound, like breath, like something trying to remember how to speak. You freeze, the lights ripple and the whispers grow. You follow them not with your feet, but with your attention, your whole being drawn upward into the shimmer. And then, without warning, a voice behind you says, "You hear it too, huh?" You jump. It's an elder standing beside you, wrapped in a blanket, thick with age and wisdom. She doesn't look surprised, just curious. "They say those lights are spirits," she murmurs. "Ancestors. The ones who left, but not really." You both look up. "They're dancing now," she says, "but sometimes they talk." You glance at her sideways. "What do they say?" She smiles. Depends on what you're listening for. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Among the Haida and other northern indigenous peoples, auroras were often considered spiritual phenomena. Some believed they were the souls of the dead playing ball with a walrus skull. Others thought they were ancestral messages. Still others warned never to whistle at them or they'd descend and carry you away, which, if you think about it, is exactly the kind of rule Raven would immediately break. You don't have to wonder long, because from the darkness above there's a flutter, a beat of wings, and then a shape swooping low, silhouetted against the glowing sky. Raven, of course. He dives through the lights like a child jumping into autumn leaves, scattering waves of color with every flick of his wing. The whispering grows louder, faster. It sounds like a story being told in 100 voices all at once.
Raven pulls up, spins once, and lands on a branch just above your head. He looks smug, but a little winded. Been experimenting, he croaks. You stare. With what he preens a feather, sky breath, old light, maybe a memory or two. The elder chuckles. You trying to impress someone? Raven cocks his head. Just giving the dead a better view. And here's your quirky tidbit in one particularly strange variant of the Raven myth, told only in winter, and usually after 2 cups of strong berry wine. It's said that Raven once tried to date the Aurora, that he courted her with fish guts and sky songs, that they had an argument when she refused to sparkle on his birthday, and he's been meddling with her ever since. Whether you believe that or not, it's hard to deny that something unusual is happening up there. The lights aren't random tonight. They move with purpose, rhythm, almost like dance. And the whispers, they don't scare you anymore. They feel close, intimate.
Like a lullaby being hummed from the edge of your memories. The elder closes her eyes. Her lips move in silence. A name of someone long gone. The lights pulse gently. And in that moment you understand Raven didn't just steal the sun. He cracked the sky wide open. He let things out. Things we forgot. Things we buried. Things we never dared speak aloud but now find painted across the night, bright and impossible to ignore. Historians still debate whether this spirit sky belief was metaphor vision or encoded grief practice. Some say it was a coping mechanism. Others call it sacred astronomy. But to you it feels like both. Grief that glows, memory that dances, and Raven. He watches you watch the lights. Then with a wink, he says, "Don't whistle." Then flies straight into the aurora, scattering whispers behind him like feathers. You and the elder stand in silence, and somewhere far above someone you miss just might be dancing. The morning after the aurora, the village is quiet, but it's not the hush of fear or confusion, it's reverent. People move more slowly, like they're still halfway in a dream they're trying not to disturb. No one rushes, no one speaks louder than a whisper. Even Raven is nowhere to be seen, which honestly is suspicious. You walk through the village, stepping over driftwood, weaving between carved poles. You see the feather he dropped near the cooking fire. It's now tied into a girl's braid, fluttering gently with her every step. A boy wears another in his waistband like a dagger. Everyone seems to have something that glows, just a little more than usual. The aurora's memory lingers not just in the sky, but in the people. And in the stories, because last night unlocked something. Now everyone wants to tell their version. Some say the lights were ancestors, some say they were dreams that got loose.
One boy insists they were ghosts of old stories coming down to play tag with Raven. His sister says they were just fish spirits swimming across the sky. They bicker, laugh, argue, and then retell the story again, tweaked, twisted, improved. By afternoon, the smoke from fire pits curls upward with a different rhythm. Not the rhythm of cooking or ceremony, but of storytelling. That ancient beat. You sit beside an elder who's carving a new mask. The cedar is soft, fragrant, singing a little under her blade. She doesn't say what the mask is yet, just smiles. It's someone you know, but not how you remember. You lean closer. The face is Raven's, but more abstract. One side is wide-eyed and laughing. The other is closed, as if sleeping. Between them, a jagged seam. Light on one side, she says. Shadow on the other. And here's your mainstream historical fact in Haida art: duality is essential.
Masks often depict two expressions at once: joy and sorrow, trickery and wisdom, life and death, because the stories themselves are not meant to resolve cleanly. They are meant to reflect reality, layered, shifting, unsettled. Just like Raven, you watch as the elder paints the carved beak with red ochre, then dips her finger in ash and smudges the other side grey. Balance, motion, tension. In this world, Raven is not hero or villain. He's pivot. He's the hinge on which meaning swings. But Raven himself, he finally reappears at dusk, soaring in from the sea with fish guts in his beak and something too shiny in his talons. He lands near the fire pit, drops the loot and grins. "Miss me?" Nobody answers. They're too busy reenacting the story of the aurora from last night with masks, drumming and enthusiastic improvisation. One child plays the moon, walking in circles and looking dramatically lost. Another plays the aurora swaying with arms high, humming in a made-up language. And Raven is played by a goat wearing a blanket. The goat is chewing grass and not really participating, but somehow it works. Raven squawks in protest. That's not how it happened. The storyteller shrugs. That's how we remember it. And here's your quirky tidbit. In a lesser-known Haida tradition, it's said that stories are alive. Once spoken, they grow change age and can even be offended. If mistold, a story might twist itself out of memory, or worse, return in dreams and demand correction. That's why telling it well is both an art and a responsibility. Raven huffs and flaps onto a low branch. He watches the play unfold, watching his own story unspool in ways he definitely did not authorize. Still, he doesn't stop them. Because deep down, even for a bird built from contradiction, he knows the stories are no longer his. He may have started the fire, but the people are the ones who feed it now. You sit back the sky, darkening overhead, and listen to the drums echo like footsteps across the stars. Historians might argue whether this myth ever truly belonged to Raven at all, or if it was the people's all along waiting for the right trick to pull it into view. But out here with the aurora's shimmer still pulsing behind your eyes, none of that matters. What matters is that the world speaks now. And we answer with cedar, with laughter, with light. The tide is low this morning, exposing slick stones, kelp beds, and quiet secrets normally hidden beneath the sea. You walk the shore, barefoot toes sinking into cool sand, watching barnacles hiss and blink as the sun climbs lazily over the water. Behind you, the village is stirring, but slowly. The nights have been different lately. Stories blooming in the dark like nocturnal flowers. Children waking up with strange dreams they insist are real. Even the wind seems to carry echoes, phrases you thought were only spoken in myth, now whispered in the rustling spruce branches. And as for Raven, he's building a canoe. Yes, really. You spot him down by the river bend, perched on a half-carved log, inspecting it with exaggerated seriousness. He taps it with his beak, tilts his head, hops inside, hops back out. He scowls, then flutters to a nearby rock and mutters, It's not quite mystical enough. You raise an eyebrow. Planning a trip, you ask. He doesn't look at you but smirks. Not a trip, a crossing. Now here's your historical anchor. The Haida were legendary seafarers. Their massive ocean-going canoes carved from single red cedar trees were feats of both engineering and artistry. These weren't just boats, they were vessels of identity, power, and spiritual purpose. Some were said to sail not only through water but between worlds, which, as it turns out, is exactly Raven's plan. You sit nearby as he fusses over the canoe, lining the inside with moss, stuffing small pockets with cedar bark and sea urchin shells. He drops in one feather, just one, and hums to himself something low and melodic. It doesn't sound like a trick, it sounds like a memory. Then he looks at you sideways. Want to see what's on the other side? You blink. Of the river. No, he croaks. Of here. The wind stills, the trees pause, and the canoe shimmers. You step in without thinking. Not because you trust Raven, but because the air around him is humming in a way that says something big is about to break open. He pushes off with one wing, and suddenly you're gliding. Not on water, not quite, but on something like it. The river gleams beneath you, but the reflections don't match. You see stars in the midday sky. You see faces in the ripples, old ones familiar, and strange, flickering like candlelight. You pass under a low-hanging cedar branch, and the light changes. Everything goes quieter, softer, and there on the far side of the river the world is different. Not completely, it still smells like salt and smoke and pine. But everything glows from within like it's remembering itself in real time. You see totems taller than trees, you see animals walking upright, not like humans, but like themselves, with purpose, with language written in every gesture. You see someone carving stars into the side of a boulder. Another person whispering to a fish and waiting for an answer. Raven glides beside you in the canoe, head tilted, back eyes half-lidded. "Nice ride," he says. "What is this, you ask?" He shrugs. Some call it the spirit world. Others say it's what the world was before forgetting. Or maybe it's what the world wants to be when it dreams. You float past a circle of figures singing with no mouths. They glow faintly, but their shadows are huge. One of them nods at you, solemn and kind. It feels like a place both sacred and silly, like a playground built inside a church. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some coastal myths, shamans were said to journey between realms in canoes made of intention. Not wood, not bark, just purpose. They travelled on beams of moonlight, or followed the breath of whales across invisible oceans. Time bent, meaning dissolved, and when they returned, they always came back changed. You turn to Raven. "Why bring me here?" He squints to show you what's underneath. Underneath what? This he says and gestures vaguely at everything. Stories, light, even tricks. The canoe slows. You drift into a grove of trees that look like they're carved from smoke and song. At their base, masks are buried in the roots, laughing, crying, some with both expressions at once. This place, Raven says quietly, is made of the stories we don't tell. Yet. You reach out and touch one of the masks. It shifts beneath your fingers, becomes a memory, then a face, then a star. Raven watches. No one comes here unless they're ready to forget something he says. And remember something else. You sit in silence. The canoe rocks gently, and then slowly it turns. The current begins to carry you back, not upstream, not downstream, but back to your side of the river, to to the village, to the fire, to the version of the world where Raven still hasn't told you everything. Historians may never know whether these canoe journeys were metaphors, medicine, visions, or metaphysical reality. But you were there, and you saw the masks beneath the roots. Smoke curls gently from the fire pit, twisting upward into the morning air, joining the mist that clings low to the forest floor. You sit with your back against a totem, knees drawn up, watching as the first rays of sunlight sneak through the trees like gossip. The canoe ride still clings to you. Not in your limbs they feel rested, but somewhere deeper, like your thoughts are echoing in a slightly larger room than before. You're not alone. The villagers seem changed too, not visibly, but in the way they move. They listen more closely, speak more carefully. Even laughter feels softer, like a drum beaten with a padded stick. And stories, they're blooming like wildflowers. Everywhere you turn, someone is telling one. The young woman gutting fish hums a tune about Raven losing a bet to his cedar stump. An old man mutters into his tea about the time Raven accidentally created mosquitoes. A child insists Raven once swallowed the entire sea and burped out jellyfish. You smile. Because these aren't just jokes anymore, they're offerings, and the smoke above it carries those stories up out beyond. That's when you realize something. The smoke shapes itself. It's not random, not this morning. It curls, yes, but purposefully. It dances in circles, then lines, then symbols. You watch one wisp split into two birds chasing each other. Another forms a hand, another a mask. The stories are rising, and someone or something is listening. You glance upward, and there he is, Raven, perched on the tallest house pole, wings slightly outstretched for balance feathers catching sunlight like stained glass. He doesn't speak, doesn't caw, just watches. He's always watching. He leans forward, then with exaggerated flair, he dives, not into the village, not toward the sea, into the smoke. You gasp as he disappears, not through it, not behind it, but into it, gone. The smoke thickens for a moment, then settles, a beat. Then from the fire itself a single feather floats upward. It spins once, twice, then lands gently on your shoulder. Everyone sees it, no one moves. Because now they understand Raven has entered the stories. He's no longer just the subject, he's the smoke. And here's your historical insight. In many Haida rituals, smoke was considered sacred, not just as a means of warmth or cooking, but as a vehicle, a path between realms. Shamans burned specific herbs to carry messages upward. Families lit fire for the dead, believing their stories would ride the tendrils home. So it makes sense. Raven, never one to sit still, has taken a new form. Now he moves in metaphors, in retellings, in the crackle of a fire and the rising breath of a story shared at dusk. You walk through the village and listen. Each hut, each cooking circle, each group of weaving hands is telling him again and again. In one tale he's still flying. In another he's a grain of sand who dreams of wings. In another, he's the sound your name makes when spoken by someone you miss. The details vary, but the laughter always the same. And the lessons too, not tidy ones, not moral bullet points, just nudges, invitations, reminders that the world isn't fixed, that it bends when you look at it sideways, that sometimes light comes from mischief, that truth often wears a beak. You sit again at the fire that evening, the feather still tucked into your shoulder wrap. The flames dance low and someone begins a new version of the old tale. This one, they whisper, is how Raven tricked time into repeating itself. You lean forward, caught again, Because of course time repeats, that's what stories do. And here's your quirky tidbit. Among the Haida and other coastal peoples, cyclical time was understood intuitively tied not just to seasons and tides, but to stories themselves. A tale wasn't over when finished, it simply rested, waited, and reappeared, retold, reborn, reimagined. Raven then becomes not just a character but a pattern, a pulse. You glance back at the fire and in the smoke rising now you see him again, just for a moment, a wing, a grin, a gleam, then he's gone, and someone says, "Tell it again," and someone else begins. You wake to the sound of the tide pulling at the shore, that slow, foamy inhaling and exhaling of the ocean that never quite stops. The sea has always been there, humming its deep blue lullaby. But now, after Raven's dance across the sky and his dive into the smoke, it seems more attentive, more aware. You step onto the beach, warm driftwood underfoot, and the water is gleaming again, ripples moving in patterns too perfect to be chance. They twist into spirals, break into mirrored lines, collapse again into circles. Someone nearby mutters, "The sea remembers," and it's true. Ever since Raven flung sunlight into the sky and whispers into the night, the ocean hasn't quite returned to its old silence. You hear voices in the waves sometimes, laughter, echoes, stories curling in on themselves, and sometimes Raven's name. You kneel at the shoreline and scoop water into your palm. For a moment it's perfectly still, glass smooth. Then it trembles and inside it you swear you see a feather. Just a shimmer. Just a flicker. Gone before your mind can catch it. Behind you, someone begins to drum, not loudly, just a low, steady rhythm like footsteps on a distant wooden bridge. Then a voice joins in deep and rhythmic. He dropped the sun into the sea and the tide forgot to rest. That line circles through the village. No one remembers who said it first, but it sticks. Children chant it while skipping stones. Fishermen hum it while threading net. It's carved eventually into the side of a canoe, and it becomes truth not because someone proved it, but because everyone felt it. And here's your historical anchor. In Haida and other coastal cultures, tides weren't just understood scientifically, they were spiritual, relational. Some oral traditions describe the sea as having moods. It could be angry, curious, hungry, asleep. It could remember things. It could respond to deeds, especially those involving light or loss. And loss, the ocean knows it well. A grandmother sits near the fire, braiding thin strips of cedar into a cord. She tells a story of when the sea swallowed her brother in a sudden storm. The waves, she says, didn't roar. They whispered, took him gently, as if reclaiming something, but she doesn't sound bitter. She looks at the water and says, "He lives in the tide now, brings fish when we ask nicely, makes mischief when we forget." She smiles and you notice she's tied a black feather into her braid. Raven's reach, it seems, extends even into grief, because grief too is a kind of story, a kind we carry in salt and song. You walk along the beach as the tide begins to rise and something strange catches your eye. The ripples are spelling something. You blink and it's gone. But you're sure. Just for a second they shaped Raven's beak, and then his eye, watching, always. And here's your quirky tidbit. In one coastal legend, Raven once tried to drink the sea. He claimed it tasted too smug and attempted to swallow the whole thing in one giant gulp. Naturally, it didn't work. But from that day on, the sea began mimicking Raven, changing directions, unexpectedly hiding shiny objects and sometimes returning what was lost just to see your reaction. Back at the village, the tide rolls in and out like breath, and the people adjust without thinking. They shift their baskets higher up the sand, pull canoes farther ashore, feed scraps to the water, not as garbage but as gifts. You ask a child why. They say it helps the sea dream better. That night the tide comes in high and gleaming, and the waves seem to speak in rhythm. He dropped the sun into the sea, and the tide forgot to rest. You lie near the fire, listening to the ocean breathe. The surf hums, the stars blink overhead, and in the hush between waves you feel the water remembering you. Raven doesn't show up that night, but his echo does. In the foam, in the rhythm, in the stories that wash ashore already shaped into driftwood masks and shell-lined poems. The ocean leaves behind more than seaweed and broken shells now. Each morning you find something strange washed up on the shore, an object, a sound, sometimes even a gesture. Today it's a smooth piece of driftwood carved with eyes, just two. One wide open, one barely a slit, the kind of thing Raven would leave behind to remind you that you're never seeing the whole story. You pick it up and carry it back to the village, unsure if it's a warning or a joke. Both probably. You pass the carver's shed, where tools lie scattered like bones after a feast. No one's carving today, though, they're dancing. A circle has formed around a girl who wears a cedar bark crown and a robe of woven eelgrass. She spins, pauses, and stretches her arms into the shape of wings. The drums follow her rhythm. She's not performing. She's remembering, or maybe rehearsing something she dreamed. The people call it Raven dance, but it changes every time. Sometimes the dancer hops like a bird, sometimes she stumbles like someone lost in a cave. Once she just stood still, arms raised for what felt like an hour, and when she finally moved, everyone cried. No one knows why. You sit with an elder nearby and he leans in close. They say that when Raven dropped the sun into the world, it wasn't just fire, it was motion. Before that, everything stayed still, even our bones. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Many indigenous dance traditions are seen as more than performance. They are embodiments of myth. Movement becomes a language, a ceremony, a reliving of origin. The Haida and neighboring peoples used dance to pass on knowledge, too subtle or sacred for words. Sometimes the dance said what the tongue could not. You return to your feet drawn by the circle. More dancers enter. Some wear masks, long-beaked, feather-fringed, absurd, and holy all at once. Others wear none at all. Their faces are painted half light, half dark. A boy moves like wind caught in a cage. A woman dances the story of ravens stealing fish by pretending to cry beside an empty basket. Raven himself is watching. Not in person, of course, though you wouldn't put it past him to be wearing someone else's face tonight. But you feel him, in the flicker of the fire, in the way the dancers occasionally smirk in perfect unison, in the sudden gust of wind that sweeps through just as someone raises their arms like wings. And here's your quirky tidbit. One rare tale tells of Raven inventing dance entirely. Bored one day, he tied seashells to his ankles and jumped from rock to rock, imitating seals. When people laughed, he called it art. When they copied him, he declared himself a choreographer. Typical. You lie back and watch the dance continue. It isn't flawless. Sometimes someone trips. Sometimes the rhythm lags. Sometimes a mask falls off and underneath the dancer's face is crying, even though the dance is meant to be joyful. No one stops. because that's part of the story too. The stumbles, the slips, the cracks, where the light leaks through. You notice that driftwood eyepiece in your lap again. When you look through both holes at once, the dance blurs. But if you close one eye, it sharpens. One dancer, one moment, one truth, and then it slips away again. A small child runs through the crowd, yelling, "I saw Raven in the fire, he was eating the drums." People laugh. One elder says, "Sounds about right." You feel something brush your shoulder and look up just in time to see a black feather tumble from the sky. It's still warm. The dance slows, the fire dims, the dancers sit. No one applauds, that's not the point. What just happened wasn't a show, it was a remembering, a retelling of the light's arrival through feet and breath and sweat, a way to say we're still inside the story, and the story isn't over. Historians might note that these improvisational dances serve as repositories of communal memory, that they reflect cosmological frameworks, social roles, even resistance against cultural erasure. All true, but none of it captures the way your skin feels when a drum beat stops just before you expect it and leaves you breathless. You curl the driftwood mask against your chest and lie down by the fire. Tonight, you dream not in images but in gestures, a wing extended, a shadow cast, a dancer balancing light in both hands. Morning breaks not with sound but with shimmer, the kind of light that makes puddles look like portals and turns spiderwebs into silver maps of forgotten places. You move slowly through it, reluctant to disturb the hush that settled over the village. Today is a feast day, not because the fish are unusually plentiful or because anyone's birthday needs celebrating. Today is for remembering. A potlatch, they call it, a ceremonial feast where gifts flow like river water and stories are the currency no one hoards. You sit near the longhouse entrance, helping to weave bark strips into a ceremonial blanket. Others grind ochre for face paint, carve symbols into fish-shaped copper plaques, or gently polish the old masks that will be worn again tonight, each one a face borrowed from legend. And Raven. He's already here. Not in feathers today, but in the form of a young man with a crooked smile and a bit of soot on his cheek. You're not fooled. Neither is anyone else. He's walking from group to group offering advice about how to stack the firewood just a little more dramatically, about which shell necklaces reflect the light best, about whether it would be too much to serve smoked salmon in the shape of a sun. Too much, someone repeats. You stole the sun. Raven grins. And here's your historical fact: potlatches were more than celebrations, they were systems of governance, law, and cultural continuity. In Haida society, a chief might give away vast wealth in a single potlatch, solidifying status, not by accumulation, but by generosity. These events passed down lineage rights and sacred knowledge, all encoded in performance food and gift exchange. As the sun climbs, guests begin to arrive. From across the water, canoes glide into the cove like long shadows wearing cedar hats. Crews paddle in rhythm faces, painted songs echoing over the tide. It's not just villagers today, it's neighbouring clans, distant cousins, messengers from up the coast, all drawn by the whisper they're telling Raven's story again. You watch the beach fill with laughter, drumming, and gifts piled like fallen stars. Baskets, shells, smoked halibut bark robes, carved bone combs, and one particularly impressive necklace made entirely of bare teeth. The feasting begins before the sun reaches its peak. Everyone eats until the line between full and floating begins to blur. You taste something unfamiliar, sweet smoky, maybe slightly cursed, and a boy beside you swears it's the same recipe Raven used when he tricked the moon into dancing. No one questions it. And here's your quirky tidbit: in one fringe version of the Raven myth, he throws a potlatch for himself. He invites everyone, spirits, humans, even rocks, and then gifts them things they already own. It ends with Raven stealing back every gift and the leftovers. The moral, apparently, was don't let tricksters plan the menu. But today's feast feels different. There's reverence here, not solemnity, but respect. As the final trays are cleared and the shadows grow long, the stories begin. Not shouted, not performed, shared. One elder stands and speaks of the day Raven painted the sky. Another sings the story of the girl who swallowed a pine needle. A young boy rises nervous and tells a version where Raven becomes the moon's husband and keeps forgetting her anniversary. The crowd howls with laughter. Even the wind seems to lean in. And Raven, he just listens. For once, no interruptions, no corrections. He leans against a cedar beam, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded, letting the stories spiral outward from him like heat from a hidden fire. Because that's the thing about legends. You might light the first spark, but the warmth that comes from others tending the flame. The sky deepens into that familiar indigo, and torches are lit along the outer walls. Smoke drifts upward, carrying food scent, memory, and song. Someone plays a low, steady beat on a bentwood box drum, and slowly guests begin placing gifts at the center of the fire ring. Not to be taken, just acknowledged. A carved copper shield, a pair of carved eagle feathers, a woven belt with small white beads shaped like eyes. They're not offerings. They're echoes, physical answers to the question Raven never asked out loud. What will you do with the light I gave you? And here's a detail scholars often overlook in potlatch culture. Wealth was not measured in what you kept, but in what you released. Just like the sun, just like stories, just like Raven's own flight, meaning is made in the giving. You lie back as the last fire crackles low. Someone is telling the story again, this time slower, softer. The version where Raven didn't mean to help, but accidentally gave the world a rhythm it didn't know it needed. You drift towards sleep beneath a sky full of stars and smoke. And just before your eyes close, something drops a shiny pebble beside your foot. You don't have to look. It's Raven's way of saying, you're part of this now. The feast is over, but the silence that follows isn't empty. It hums full of what's just been spoken, what's just been sung. You can still feel the echo of drum beats in your chest. The scent of cedar smoke clings to your skin like an old story that refuses to end. Morning fog rolls in from the sea, soft and slow, wrapping the village like a blanket not yet ready to be folded. You wander down toward the beach again, following the faint sound of something metallic clinking against stone. There, half buried in the sand, is a copper shield, not big, not heavy, just palm-sized, etched with the swirling lines of salmon sun and feather. It gleams faintly even in the fog. You pick it up, and for a moment you see your own reflection, but your face is warped, laughing on one side, grim on the other. You glance up instinctively. Raven is perched nearby on a piling. "Nice, huh?" he croaks. "That one's part of the exclusive collection." He flutters down and lands beside you, beak tilted, claws clicking softly on the stones. "I used to trade those, you know," he says, as if reminiscing about an old summer job, before the sky thing, before I got complex. You raise an eyebrow. You sold copper shields. Traded, he corrects, for stories, or promises, or good fish, depends on the mood. And here's your historical insight. Copper shields, called coppers, were a major form of wealth and status among Haida and other coastal First Nations. They were not currency in the usual sense, but symbols of legacy. Their value wasn't fixed. It depended on the story attached to them. One copper might be worth a canoe, another an entire longhouse if the tale it carried was strong enough. Raven paces beside you, tail feathers flicking. They always thought it was the metal that mattered, he says, but really it was the meaning. He picks up a rock and turns it in his claws. Put the right lie behind anything, and it becomes treasure. He grins. You walk with him up the beach, the little copper shield still warm in your hand. In the village square, people are already gathering again, not for a feast this time, but a trade. Not just goods, though. There are baskets, dried berries, carved combs and woven ropes. This market trades in stories, in histories, in whispered truths that sparkle more than any coin. One man offers a necklace in exchange for a song that was nearly forgotten. A child gives up her lucky stone for the right to carry the story of the time Raven sneezed a mountain into the ocean. You can't help but laugh, but no one's joking. The stories are the wealth. And here's your quirky tidbit in some Haida tales. Raven is said to have stolen the first copper shield, not from a chief or spirit, but from a clam. Apparently the clam had been hoarding shiny things, and Raven, insulted by its stinginess, tricked it into opening its shell and pried the copper free. He then claimed he invented trade. You wander between the booths and bundles and fires listening. Everyone's trading something: a carved fish for a story about the moon, a torn cloak for the secret name of a cloud. One woman tells of a night when the stars fell and turned into mushrooms. A man insists that when he was young, Raven taught him how to swim by throwing him into the sea and calling it a lesson in buoyancy. And always, Raven hovers nearby. Not interfering, just collecting, watching the stories take on new life, change hands, change shape. Because that's his secret joy, isn't it? Not the stealing, not the showing off, but the circulation. To take a story, give it away, hear it told, back to you days later, completely wrong, but somehow better. That's his wealth, his empire, his favorite joke. You settle beside an old woman who holds another copper shield in her lap. This one is dented, a little tarnished. She polishes it slowly with a piece of wool. This one's from before the sun, she murmurs, before Raven's feather turned black. It remembers. You ask her what it remembers. She leans close. A time when the world waited, when everything breathed in but hadn't exhaled yet. Raven cracked that silence open. And here's the debate among scholars: were coppers literal artifacts of wealth, or were they mnemonic devices, physical keys to oral archives? Some researchers suggest every dent, every scratch, every spiral carved into a shield was meant to hold not just story but responsibility. You look down at the one in your hand again, and suddenly it feels heavier, not from weight, but from memory. From meaning. Raven hops onto a nearby stump flaps once and says, "Careful, they're sticky, sticky." He nods solemnly. Once you carry a story, it tends to carry you back. You sit with that. Then slip the little copper shield into the pouch at your hip. Later by the fire, someone will ask where you got it. and you'll smile, and you'll lie just a little. Because that's the deal, isn't it, with Raven? And with memory. Tonight, the forest glows not from fire, but from fungus. You notice it as you return from the shoreline. Small patches of ghostly green light blooming along the roots of fallen logs and curling around mossy stones. It doesn't shine. It breathes, like the ground itself is remembering the stars. Foxfire, someone whispers beside you. Raven's crumbs, you blink. The speaker is gone. Only the trail of glowing mycelium remains. You crouch to touch it, but stop just before your fingers graze the light. It hums softly like distant laughter underwater. Raven's laughter, because of course. He's done something again. The elders say the forest was always like this, alive in ways you weren't trained to notice. It pulses, listens, offers gifts in the dark. But lately things seem louder. A tree sways when there's no wind. A log sings very faintly when the moonlight hits it just right. And deep in the heart of the woods, something waits. You're not alone in feeling it. The village gathers that night around a clearing none of you remember clearing. A ring of tall trees forms a near-perfect circle, the kind of shape Raven would definitely claim to have invented. The fire is lit in silence. Not solemn, not afraid. Just ready. And Raven, he arrives last. Drifting down from the canopy with deliberate flair, feathered but wearing a necklace of fish bones and moss. He's made himself look bigger tonight, more dramatic. More like the kind of spirit who might demand tribute or declare a new calendar. But instead he just bows and begins to speak, not in trickery, not in riddles, but in truth, or something close to it. And here's your historical anchor. Haida's storytelling wasn't only for children, it was also political, spiritual, legal. Myths could declare land rights. Tales could settle disputes. Storytelling was governance. Raven wasn't just a prankster. He was also a voice through which deeper laws of nature and culture could be understood if you listened between the jokes. Tonight, Raven speaks of beginnings. Not the beginning, just a beginning. He tells of a world of stillness, of water stretched flat to every edge, of light curled tight inside a shell beneath the belly of the sea, of creatures who waited not for rescue, not for purpose, but for mischief. Because mischief, he says, is how movement begins. And with movement comes time, and with time stories, and stories. They're the real sun. He pauses, lets the silence breathe. Then with one feather he touches the fire. The flame flickers green like the foxfire at your feet. And suddenly every person in the circle sees something different. A woman sees her late grandmother weaving cedar thread into a sleeping mat. A boy sees the mountain he'll someday climb alone just to scream.
An elder sees a memory she buried so deeply she forgot it was hers. And you see a child yourself maybe staring up at the stars and daring them to move. The fire burns brighter and Raven steps back. Because the story now belongs to the people again. And here's your quirky tidbit in some obscure Haida fragments. Raven doesn't just steal the sun, he eats it, swallows it whole. Then spends days trying to digest it, burping sparks that become the stars and eventually sneezes out the moon. The result? The world begins not with a bang, but with indigestion. The villagers begin to speak slowly at first, then all at once. A flood of stories, old and new. One voice starts a tale, another finishes it. Someone else flips it backward and makes it rhyme. Laughter rises, so does weeping, so does the fire, and the forest hums in response. Above you, the trees lean in, not threatening, but curious. The foxfire at your feet pulses in rhythm with the flames.
You feel your breath sinking with the group, with the ground, with the pulse. It's not about Raven anymore. Not really. He lit the match. You're building the blaze. And the sky above, watching. Silent, waiting for what comes next. Historians still argue whether these circle fires were spontaneous rituals or carefully structured performances. But here now that question feels absurd. It doesn't matter what the blueprint was, it matters that it works. You leave the clearing hours later, the forest still glowing behind you, firelight caught in your eyelashes. Raven watches from a high branch, wings tucked, eyes soft. He doesn't say anything, he doesn't have to. For the first time he's not the loudest thing in the woods. The story is. Dawn arrives quietly this time. No showy colours, no dramatic fog, just a pale gold light sliding through the trees like a secret you're supposed to overhear. The village is still asleep, but something stirs just beneath the surface of the silence. You feel it, you stretch, yawn, step outside. The air tastes different, like ash and cedar and ink. You follow the scent to the old carving shed where someone or something has been drawing all night. Every scrap of bark, hide and fish skin has been covered in symbols, spirals, lines, tiny bird tracks, a pair of eyes that follow you no matter where you stand. Raven's been writing again, which is odd, because Raven doesn't usually write. He prefers smoke signals, accidental prophecies, and loud, unverified claims yelled from treetops. But this looks like an archive. You pick up one hide. It's stiff with age, or maybe just attitude. On it, a scene drawn in thick charcoal strokes. Raven with a long beak and wild eyes cracking open the sun like an egg. Inside, not fire, but words. Letters tumbling out like startled fish. Where do the stories go when no one's listening? Someone says behind you, it's an elder. The same one who carved the mask with light on one side, shadow on the other. She's sitting cross-legged cleaning a brush made of seal whiskers. You think they die, she asks. Or hide, you don't know. But it's a good question. And here's your historical insight. Although most Haida storytelling was oral symbols, especially formline art, and crest figures, functioned as a kind of visual language. Totem poles, paddles, and hout screens all told stories through design. Some historians believe certain images encoded mythic episodes too sacred or complex to speak aloud. The elder hands you a strip of bark. Try, you hesitate, then draw, a spiral, a beak, a sun caught between two hands. No idea what it means, but it feels true. She nods. There. Now it's alive. You spend the morning drawing, not carefully, not with training, just letting your hands follow the twitch of memory. Others join you kids first, of course. Then a few brave adults. Soon every available surface is covered smoke-dyed cloth, driftwood planks the side of a canoe. One man draws the story of Raven tricking the trees into growing crooked. A girl paints a map that only makes sense if you're upside down. Someone inks the dream they had of Raven sewing lightning into a blanket and wrapping the earth in it. Raven watches from the longhouse roof, looking very pleased with himself. And here's your quirky tidbit in a fringe Haida story. Raven tries to patent the alphabet. He claims he invented language by sneezing during a lightning storm. According to the tale, every letter was born from the sound of him falling off a tree limb and yelling, "Ah, hutch!" Naturally, he tried to charge people for for using vowels. Your hand cramps, you stop drawing. Look at the mess, it's beautiful, chaotic, honest. A living scroll written in bark and soot and guts. Someone suggests burning it all, not out of anger but as offering, so that the smoke can carry the symbols to the sky. Stories like to rise, a woman says. Raven flaps down beside her. Also helps with storage issues. So you pile the drawings, build a fire and light it. The flames dance high, the smoke turns dark, then shimmering grey, and as it rises it curls into shapes, a wing, a mask, a child holding a son. The villagers don't speak, they just watch, because they know this is a telling too, and maybe the most sacred one. Historians may never agree whether these rituals count as writing, but that's the wrong question, isn't it? The real one is, can you read with your bones? Can you understand with your skin? Can you remember in a way that leaves no words behind but still leaves meaning? The fire dies down, the ash cools. The elder hands you a fresh piece of bark and whispers, "Next time start with what didn't happen." You grin, because that's Raven's favorite place to begin. You don't plan to go into the woods today, but the path finds you anyway. It starts with a whisper from a raven, not raven, just a raven who lands near your breakfast and stares until you follow. Then come the stones, arranged in a spiral at the edge of the village. You've never seen them before. You blink and they're pointing inward, drawing your feet toward the trees, like a secret waiting to be told. So you go, because stories don't always wait for permission. The woods are quieter than usual, not dead, not eerie, just attentive. You step carefully over moss-covered roots past trees that lean in a little too close. They don't want to stop you, they want to see. After a while you find a clearing you didn't know existed. At its center, a tree. Not tall, not broad, but odd. Its bark spirals in two directions at once. Its branches hold feathers, bones, small carved stones hung on twine. A black feather is wedged deep into its bark, fresh.
And there just below it, someone's scratched a circle into the dirt. Inside a story, drawn in crude lines. You recognize Raven, of course. Then a cave. A woman with her eyes closed and her mouth open wide, like she's singing or screaming or both. You crouch, tracing it. Something shifts in the air. You blink, and suddenly the clearing is gone. You're in a cave, not dark, not cold, just vast, glowing from within like the inside of a breathing animal. Echoes twist around you in shapes you almost recognize. A voice calls out, not a voice you hear, but one you remember, your own, telling a story you've never spoken aloud. And here's your historical anchor. In Haida, cosmology caves are often linked to origins, wombs of the world spaces of transformation. Some origin myths describe people emerging from holes in the earth, or being shaped in underground places of fire and story. The land is not passive, it births, devours, listens, teaches.
In the cave you see memories carved into the walls. Not yours, but familiar. Raven again, only here he's smaller, less arrogant, more curious. He's perched beside a woman whose face flickers, now human, now sky, now root. She says, "You can't steal light. You can only open it." He scoffs, same result. She laughs, not cruel, just tired. Then offers him something, a glowing seed no bigger than a thumbprint. He eats it. His feathers flash gold. He flies, and the cave trembles, not from collapse but from birth. The memory ends. You find yourself back in the clearing, sweating, shivering, smiling. And here's your quirky tidbit in a version rarely told except on the darkest winter nights. Raven doesn't steal the sun. He becomes it, swallows it whole, loses himself in its heat, forgets his name, and must be sung back by the other animals. The song that saves him. A lullaby made entirely of questions. You rise. The circle is still there. But now, a second figure has been scratched beside Raven you. Crude, stick-limbed, but unmistakably present. The story has made room. Back at the village, someone is humming a tune you've never heard, but somehow know. The trees part a little easier for you now. The stones at the forest edge are gone. Their spiral journey complete. You walk to the fire pit, sit down and close your eyes, not to sleep, to listen. The world is humming again, this time in your key. Historians still argue whether individual spiritual experiences were canon in Haida myth systems or personal variations. But if Raven has taught you anything, it's that canon is mostly a suggestion, a jumping-off point. The story always leaves space for improvisation, always. And today the story used you. And you let it, you touch the back of your neck, it's warm, something feather-shaped, burns softly there. The next day arrives with no warning, no birdsong, no sunrise theatrics. Just a quiet realization that you're already awake, already moving, already inside something that began before you noticed. People around the village seem to feel it too. They walk slower, not sleepy, careful. Like each step is part of a ritual they don't want to misstep. You pass a woman holding a cedar branch in both hands. She's not sweeping, she's listening to what you don't know, but it feels important. Raven is nowhere to be seen, which of course means he's everywhere. The silence he leaves behind is not empty, it's expectant. Like everyone knows something is about to happen, but no one wants to say it first. At the edge of the village, someone builds a frame. 4 posts, no roof, just his square drawn in wood and cord. People begin to gather. You ask what it is, mirror, someone says. Then walks away. You approach, step inside. Nothing changes until it does. The air thickens. The light goes soft around the edges. You hear breathing that isn't yours. You stand in the middle of the frame and see yourself, but not in reflection, in story. Your body is made of lines now, form line curves and crescents, ovoids and hooks. Your eyes are raven-shaped. Your spine spirals like smoke. You are a glyph, a myth, a version of yourself that has always existed in the telling. And here's your historical insight. Haida art isn't just decorative, it's deeply symbolic, structured around principles that link physical identity with spiritual lineage. Form-line design turns beings into stories, and stories into beings. To draw someone this way isn't merely portrait, it's translation. Others step into the frame after you. Each one becomes something else. A grandmother becomes wind. A child becomes a knot in the sky. A fisherman turns into a long canoe filled with names. No one is surprised, because the frame shows not what you are, but what you've meant all along. And in the silence that follows, Raven appears, on the edge of the crowd, wearing a cloak of woven shadows and a smile like someone who's been waiting ages for you to catch up. He steps into the frame, and the world tilts. For just a breath you see everything every version of Raven ever imagined. The silly, the sinister, the sacred, the liar, the light-bringer, the clown and the compass. His beak shifts into a mouth, into a flute, into a doorway. Then he steps out. And you all exhale, and here's your quirky tidbit. A lesser-known Haida tale claims that Raven once got trapped inside a totem pole, not carved into it inside it. He tried to steal the meaning of the figures, but the pole swallowed him whole. He was stuck for years, forced to live out each of the stories, until he learned how to be them. Back at the fire pit, the villagers speak in low tones, not because they're hiding anything, but because the silence has become collaborative. It's no longer just the absence of noise, it's a medium, a canvas. Someone drops a stone in the center of the fire ring, then another. Soon there's a circle forming, not planned, just understood. A child says, "This is where Raven fell asleep after eating too much moon." Someone adds, "This is where he dreamed us." You smile because you've seen it now. The whole story wrapped in feathers, scratched in bark, sung in flames, drawn in circles. Raven didn't just steal the sun, he became the space around it, the frame, the silence, the shape your thoughts make before they land. Historians might try to chart the evolution of this myth. It's spread across clans, it shifts in emphasis from trickster to transformer to teacher. But you were in the mirror. You know it's not linear, it's not even circular, it spirals, and every turn is another version of truth. You lie down near the fire that night, head resting on a folded robe. The stars flicker like fireflies with secrets, and the frame stands empty now, waiting for the next story to step inside. By now the days are not so much passing as layering. Each one slides gently atop the last, like cedar bark, added to a fire not to burn fast, but to smoulder, to remember. You no longer mark time by meals or moons. You mark it by moments, by stories, told laughter, shared dreams, dreamt out loud. And lately everyone's been dreaming, vivid dreams, talking animal dreams, sky falls upward dreams. Even the fishes whisper about waking in the middle of the night with songs still in their mouths. Raven's doing, of course, you'd bet anything on it. You find him one morning at the river's edge. He's crouched, not perched, not posing, just crouched, watching the water. He looks tired, not old, just momentarily out of mischief. You sit beside him, say nothing. He finally sighs. It's all too known, he mutters, the light, the sky.
Even the trick about hiding the sun in my feathers, everyone tells it now like it's old bread. No crunch, no mystery. You shrug. It's not about the trick you say, it's about what came after. He looks at you sideways, then smirks. You've been listening, and here's your historical insight. Many versions of Raven myths include variations not just between clans but within the same community. There's no correct version. Instead, the act of retelling, shaping, exaggerating, adapting is itself part of the tradition. Stability is not the goal, fluidity is. Raven stands and stretches his wings. "I need something new," he declares. Something big. You brace yourself. But instead of flying off or shouting to the trees, he walks to the river and dips a claw into the water. It ripples outward. The fish rise not to bite, but to listen. He whispers something. You can't hear it, but the water changes. Not color, not temperature, just tone. It no longer murmurs.
It recites lines, phrases, riddles, spoken backward. A child's name you've never heard but somehow recognize. And here's your quirky tidbit in one forgotten tale. Raven tries to become water. He believes that if he flows like a river, no one can catch him. But the transformation fails. He becomes steam instead. Invisible, drifting forever, part of every kettle and storm cloud. That's why some say Raven still knows what you whispered to your tea. Back in the village, people begin collecting water in bowls, in shells, even in cupped hands. They listen to it. Not for advice, not for prophecy, just for rhythm. Some say it tells a story no one remembers yet. Others say it's just Raven showing off. But something about it feels deeper. Like the stories have soaked into the land now. Into the rivers, the moss, the breath between words. You walk through the village and notice more masks being carved, not for performance, but for hearing. Each one is slightly different. Some have hollow cheeks, others exaggerated ears. One is shaped like a full moon with a beak protruding from the chin. Listening masks, someone says, so we don't forget how. You sit by the fire that night, a bowl of water beside you. It whispers, you lean close. And in the ripple you see Raven flinging a handful of stars like pebbles, Raven hiding behind your own reflection, Raven laughing, then suddenly still. You blink, the water is just water again, but your heart is racing, because for one moment you understood, and then it slipped away just like him. Historians still debate whether these dreams and visions were metaphor or memory. Some argue they were merely side effects of diet or ritual. Others suggest they were encoded truths passed through altered states of consciousness. But here, among cedar smoke and glowing river stones, that argument feels hollow. You've heard the water speak.
And whether Raven meant for that to happen or just got bored and stirred the river again, you're part of the current now. Tonight, the moon rises like a lid, slowly lifting off a bowl of secrets. It's full, perfect, and somehow grinning. No one says it out loud, but everyone feels it. The kind of moon that watches. The kind that's clearly in on the joke before you even know there's a setup. A raven moon, if there ever was one. You sit with the others on the beach, a soft hush over the gathering, as if the tide has pulled language out to sea and hasn't quite brought it back yet. Then someone speaks, not a story this time, a question. What if Raven never gave the sun at all? The group shifts slightly. You feel people sit up straighter. A child gasps. Even the fire seems to lean forward. The speaker, a woman with white streaks in her braid and small feathers tied into her wrist, raps, nods solemnly.
I mean, she says, what if he just borrowed it and we still owe him? The ripple that moves through the group isn't fear. It's curiosity, a delicious unease. And here's your historical insight. Many indigenous myth systems are cyclical, not linear. There isn't always a before and after, but a constant turning of moments where stories can repeat, echo, or return in new forms. Raven's gift then isn't a conclusion, it's a beginning that keeps beginning. The woman continues, what if the light is on loan? She gestures to the moon, and he's just checking in. That's when you all hear it. A single caw, far off, then another, closer, and then a burst of wings, so many you can't count. Black silhouettes flood the sky above the beach. Not menacing, just choreographed, like a curtain falling upward. They don't circle, they spiral, and within that spiral, something glows. A feather. No, not glowing, burning, not destruction, but signal. It drifts down, slowly landing in the sand. You watch the crowd edge back from it instinctively, as if it hums with potential energy. Raven arrives moments later, of course. Strolling, not flapping like he's late for a party he threw himself. His feathers look extra sleek tonight, and there's a fishbone tucked behind one ear like a quill. He leans over the burning feather, grins, just checking. And here's your quirky tidbit in one rarely told Haida tale. Raven schedules annual inspections of the light. He flies by each household and squints into their windows to see if they're using it responsibly. If not, he takes back a little, just enough to make you stumble in the dark, which of course is exactly when stories tend to surface. Tonight, the feather is left alone. No one touches it, but everyone sees it. A reminder, a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that's just about to continue. Later, back at the fire, a boy whispers, "I think the light likes it here." A girl replies, "Only if we keep it weird enough." And that's the thing, isn't it? The light was never meant to be perfect. It wasn't supposed to be sterile or silent or sensible. It was supposed to flicker, to twist, to laugh and break and stitch itself back together. You think back to Raven in the cave, Raven in the smoke, Raven in the water's reflection, and now Raven at the edge of your vision watching this campfire as if waiting for someone to mess up the story just right. You lie down in the sand, hands behind your head, listening to the crackle of driftwood and the subtle laughter tucked into the waves. Historians still argue whether Raven stories are meant to teach lessons or simply to preserve culture, whether they're morality tales, cosmic blueprints, or emotional anchors in a shifting world. But none of those boxes fit, because the story keeps escaping. Every time it's caught, it slips sideways, winks, then disappears behind the next tree, the next dream, the next half-told sentence, like Raven himself. The feather eventually burns out, leaving no ash, just a faint outline in the sand. You reach out and trace it with your finger. It's still warm. You dream of a raven-shaped hole in the sky. Not the bird, not the trickster, just the space he leaves behind. It's oddly comforting, like a missing puzzle piece you never noticed until now, and suddenly the rest of the picture starts shifting to make room for it. You wake with sand in your hair and cedar smoke in your lungs. Around you, the village breathes quietly. No bustle, just the slow exhale of people who know the day doesn't need their urgency to begin. Today, you're told, is the day of the unfinished story. Not a festival, an elder says. Not really. So naturally, you ask, then, what is it? She shrugs. Just the day we tell things that haven't ended. And then she walks away, as if that explained everything, which in Raven logic it probably did. You follow others to the clearing. It's the same one where the dancers performed, where the frame was built, where the copper shields changed hands. Only today it's filled with half-made things. A paddle with no handle, a mask missing its eye holes, a robe stitched only along one edge. Every item seems to pause mid-thought. And here's your historical insight. Unfinished work wasn't always discarded in indigenous cultures. Sometimes it was purposeful, a way to acknowledge the living nature of art, of story, an admission that meaning continues long after the hands have stopped moving. A girl steps forward holding a rattle made of bark and pebbles. She shakes it once and says, and then Raven opened the box. Silence. She bows, steps back. That's it. The next person steps forward. A woman found a feather in her dream and followed it to silence. Another bow. It goes on like this. Each story cracked open, then left dangling in midair like a sentence you forgot to finish, but don't regret forgetting. And it's not frustrating, it's freeing, because the weight of meaning is no longer yours alone to carry. Someone in the crowd whispers that one ends in winter. Another murmurs No, it becomes a canoe song no one knows for sure, and no one needs to. You step forward, hold out the palm-sized copper shield Raven gave you. Raise it just high enough for the firelight to catch, then say he dropped it into the sea and said, "It belongs to whoever finds it first." But the tide, silence. The crowd nods. Someone even claps, just once. Raven appears hours later, of course. He's covered in paint, some deliberate, some suspiciously splattered. He looks like he fell into a ceremony halfway through, and then decided to stay because the food was good. "You like it?" he asks, spinning once, to display the chaos on his feathers. You raise an eyebrow? He grins. "Unfinished," he says proudly, "very in right now." And here's your quirky tidbit in one of the weirder branches of Raven lore. He begins creating a perfect world just out of boredom. He carves rivers stacks. Stars even arranges wind in alphabetical order. Then halfway through he gets distracted by a shiny rock, flies off and never comes back. The result? An awkward, lopsided paradise full of incomplete thoughts and unintended beauty. Sound familiar? As the sun lowers, the villagers begin burying their half-made objects, not like trash, more like seeds. Each hole is filled gently, covered carefully, marked with a feather or stone, because they aren't abandoning these pieces, they're trusting them. That someone or something will pick them up when the time is right. You sit near your own little hole, fingers tracing the packed earth. The copper shield is buried now, story paused mid-glint. You don't feel like you've lost anything. If anything, you feel lighter. Historians still argue whether these unfinished rituals were part of larger cycles or simply expressions of human imperfection, whether the stories were left open on purpose or forgotten by accident. But here that distinction doesn't matter, because the point is to leave room for breath, for interpretation, for Raven should he ever decide to return with a punchline. And tonight, as you lie beneath the stars, the stories don't feel done, they feel alive. Moving under the soil, twisting behind the moon, waiting, just waiting for someone to pick up the thread. The sky today is a little too blue, the kind of blue that feels stretched too tight like a drumhead, just waiting to snap. People look up at it warily, not with fear exactly, but with that special village-wide intuition that says something is up. And Raven is definitely involved, and they're right. Because tonight is the night of the missing sky. No one explains it to you, they just start preparing. Children are sent to gather stones shaped like fish. Adults begin weaving cloaks from seaweed and old ceremony scraps. One person spends an hour painting a canoe black, then pushes it into the forest instead of the sea. The preparations make no sense, which means they're probably working perfectly. You find Raven standing atop the totem pole near the fire pit. His silent wings tucked tight, beak open just a sliver. He's staring at the sky like he's remembering something or trying not to. You call up to him, "What's missing?" He doesn't answer right away. Then, "Not what? When?" And here's your historical insight in some Haida timekeeping traditions. There are moments that are not measured in days or moons, but in events. A season may be remembered not as autumn, but as the time Raven took the stars, or when the tides forgot their names. The timeline bends to memory, not numbers. As the sun sets, a fog rises, but not from the ocean, from above. It starts thin like mist, then thickens until the stars blink out one by one. Soon the moon follows, then even the outline of the sky disappears, You look up and there's just nothing, no color, no shape, no sense of direction. The sky is gone, and yet no one panics. Instead, they sing, softly at first, then louder, low, open-throated syllables that spiral up into the void. The village sings not to fill the silence, but to remind the world it's still here. And you sing too, even though you don't know the words. The ground beneath your feet hums in rhythm. The fire flickers not brighter but deeper. It casts shadows where there shouldn't be any. Then the stories begin again. This time, not in words, in shapes. Dancers glide through the invisible space where the sky used to be their cloaks, whispering like waves. One lifts a bundle wrapped in leaves and slowly unwraps. Nothing. And holds it up high, and everyone cheers. Because that's the story tonight, the missing, the absence, the space left behind. And here's your quirky tidbit in one bizarre version of the raven myth. He doesn't steal the sun, he steals everything else. The trees, the rocks, the people. He hides them in his feathers until the world is nothing but light. Too much light. Blinding, boring. So one by one he spits everything back out in the wrong order. That's why we have mountains in the sea and fish that climb rivers. The fog thickens, the singing slows. People begin to sit down, eyes closed, letting the emptiness press softly against their skin. And then, just when you think it might stay this way forever, a flicker far above. Not a star, not yet, just a spark. Then another. Then a feather falling, its pale, nearly translucent, glowing faintly like the inside of a shell. Raven appears beside you without a sound. He watches it drift. It's not always about what I bring, he murmurs. Sometimes it's about what I take away so you can see what's left. You nod because the sky's coming back. Slowly, differently. The stars return out of order. Some blink red now. The moon has a scar it didn't have before, but it's back. Not restored, just rewritten. And you lie back and laugh, because of course the sky left so it could come back weird and better. Historians still argue whether the story of the missing sky is allegory dream or seasonal ritual. But in this moment, lying on the earth with Raven chuckling beside you and a feather pressed gently into your palm, you know the truth. The sky never left. It just changed masks. You wake just before sunrise, but something's changed. The world feels settled. Not quiet. There's the rustle of wind in cedar boughs, the low song of tide against stone, the sleepy shuffle of people rising to stoke the fire. But beneath it all, there's a feeling of completion. Like a story just finished its last sentence and then whispered one more just for you. You step outside. The sky is whole again, stars winking faintly as they prepare to slip behind the growing blue. A single raven, just a raven, circles overhead, then glides down to perch on the same spot where Raven once proclaimed, "I invented shadows." And yet, it feels like him. You watch as the villagers begin to gather. No drums, no masks, no performances, just presence. People bringing things they've carried across these days, a fishbone, rattle, a bowl of water that still whispers a cloak, unfinished and proud of it. No one speaks, they don't need to, because this morning is not for telling stories, it's for holding them. Here's your historical insight. Among the Haida sacred knowledge wasn't always passed through performance. Sometimes it was transferred through presence, just being near, being still, being part of a ritual breath. Wisdom didn't require words, only witness. Someone starts a fire, not large, not ceremonial, just enough to warm hands and toast memory. The smoke curls upward and you think he'll smell that. Raven always does. And then you hear it. Not cawing, not laughter. Just a soft, amused sigh on the wind. You smile. Because he's not far, maybe perched just outside this moment, maybe hiding in your own shadow, maybe slipping down the river disguised as reflection. And here's your quirky tidbit in a quiet corner of Haida oral history. There's a tale where Raven becomes so saturated with stories that he explodes, poof, and vanishes into pieces. Every storyteller since then is said to carry one of those pieces in their mouth. That's why the elders joke, even when we lie, part of us is still telling the truth. You look at your hands, at your feet, at the smoke dancing over the morning tide. This isn't the end of the story, it's just the part where the telling stops for now. You bow your head gently, in thanks, in farewell, and in recognition that Raven doesn't live in beginnings or endings. He lives in the middle, in the misstep, in the stolen light and the muttered excuse, in the flick of a feather that changes the shape of a sky. Historians will keep debating what Raven meant, but you lived it. You felt the pull of story in your ribs. You stepped into the mirror. You walked the forest of fire and feathers, and you remembered the most sacred truth of all, that stories are alive, and they're waiting, always, for someone like you to carry them forward. Just one breath more, and now the fire fades, its glow flickers gently behind your closed eyes. The embers breathe slow and soft like an old heartbeat echoing through the logs. You feel it in your chest, in that hollow, gentle ache that stories sometimes leave behind when they're done whispering. The sky above you softens. Its colors stretch wide, blending from indigo to gold, then to the quiet gray of dawn, not quite ready to rise. You feel the air settle around your shoulders like a cloak woven from shadow and memory. The village is still. No songs, no speeches, just the hush of meaning resting gently in the space between moments. You lie back, the earth holding you like a story too ancient to name. And somewhere nearby a raven calls once, not loud, not sharp, just enough to say, "You were here." You listened, you mattered. The fire's last breath curls upward, and the world exhales. In this softness you float, drifting gently between the flicker of dreams and the hum of waking, wrapped not in feathers, but in feeling, the kind that stays long after the story ends. So rest now. Let the tale tuck itself into the folds of your mind. Let Raven fly a little farther tonight, knowing he left the light in good hands. And when you wake, you'll still carry it, quietly, wonderfully.
As all true storytellers do. End of script. Sweet dreams.